Children playing with the chickens, homemade meals from pickings, in the garden compost grown, saving our seeds hand sown, feeding our family all from scratch, growing up food in the garden patch, milking a cow, slopping the sow, what a life we've come to now. Children playing with the chickens, homemade meals from pickings, in the garden compost grown, saving our seeds hand sown, feeding our family all from scratch, growing up food in the garden patch, milking a cow, slopping the sow, what a life we've come to now. Milking the cow, slopping the sow, what a life we've come to now. I went down to the grocery store to buy some peas and carrots, but when I saw the prices there, well, my mind could hardly bear it. I was told we must accept all this inflation stuff they're spewing. It seems they're trying to drive us all right to the brink of ruin. The produce looked okay, I guess. Don't know what farm it's made on, who planted it, how it grew, what chemicals they sprayed on. Well, it really got me thinking I should grow this on my own. Got a garden plot, maybe not a lot, but it's right there at my home. From seed to spoon, gonna grow my food myself. I'd rather pick it from the ground than pick it from a grocery shelf. I'm gonna work the soil, my toil will pay off soon. I'll eat what I've grown from what I've sown, seed to spoon. Well, the corn is looking great. We've got zucchini and potatoes. I can't wait to taste a burger topped with our tomatoes. Most everything we need can be grown in our backyards. It might take a little elbow grease, but it's really not that hard. From seed to spoon, gonna grow my food myself. I'd rather pick it from the ground than pick it from a grocery shelf. I'm gonna work the soil, my toil will pay off soon. I'll eat what I've grown from what I've sown, seed to spoon.
If God wanted us to be vegetarians, he wouldn't have made cows out of meat.
We bought a farm 3 years ago to change our lives around. We got ourselves a tractor so we could plow the ground. We got some pigs and chickens and none of them are tame. Looked okay, I guess. Don't know what farm it's made on.
Testing. Good morning. I feel less heat this morning, right? So that was nice that things cooled off a little bit. Yesterday was, it was an oven. But you sat right here all morning. How many of you were here yesterday morning? Look at that. You all came back. All right. Well, I've got a couple of announcements to make before we get started. We have a really good program today. I have a couple of surprises for you, but I can't tell you about the surprise, otherwise it wouldn't be a surprise, right? So I want to mention and recognize the sponsors to our left and to our right. Some of those, like People's Bank and Provia in particular, really have no commercial interest in sponsoring this event other than the fact that they're extraordinarily generous. Now, I might say that the bank, it's my bank, it's the bank that loans me money, so I guess that doesn't mean it's my bank, right? I don't own it. Test, test. Okay, I'm back. They're here. I would highly recommend them. They are a big bank with a hometown feel. I have the cell phone number of the bank president, and I can call him anytime I want. That's not something you get from Citibank and other things. So go see Peoples at the booth. They're a nice group of people, and they do a lot of small-town banking. So I just want to thank all of those people that generously gave to this event. So I'll mention this. There were a number of people that came up to me and said, you know, we'd like to get involved, we'd like to contribute. So later this morning, where you bought your tickets, we're making available individual sponsors, if you're so inclined. We don't have a nonprofit organization for this event. We could have. It's not for profit. We do it because we want to do it, and we believe that it provides a service, and the fact that so many people are here demonstrate that. Okay, so this morning it's my distinct pleasure to introduce the first speaker. I met David 2 years ago, and I think I can say we've become good friends. He is a man, we had him on the radio last week. We did 6 segments over the course of an hour. And as we talked about different things, I began to realize just how much he has to contribute. For example, growing apples organically, that is really hard to do. Now, he said we really only have a really small orchard. It's only 25 acres. And we only have 40 acres of peaches. And I think he said 70 acres of cherries. And we're a pretty small farm. We only farm 4,000 acres. And I'm like, David, what's a big farm? Well, our neighbor farms 30,000 acres. So it's a completely different situation when you live in Oregon. So he's going to be talking about, you think about the topic here. He said that he had to overcome fears. I'm like, no kidding. I mean, you farm 4,000 acres organically back when organic wasn't a thing. I think that took a good amount of faith. So help me welcome the president of Azure Standard that delivers organic foods to all 50 states, Mr. David Stelzer.
Good morning, and thank you for coming out. I appreciate it. Hey, this subject is sometimes a little bit hard to talk about because for me it gets a little bit personal. Overcoming fear, but You know, if you look at the world around us, everybody wants us to be afraid. Everyone, you know, the media spends most of its time telling us to be afraid of something. The, corporate interests pretty much always tell us to be afraid of something. Because if we're afraid of something, we maybe buy something to help overcome the fears. And everyone benefits but us. And, you know, I realize that a lot of times when you face fears straight on is when we actually are able to completely overcome them. And I'll start with a little story from my youth. I was about 15 years old or so. One morning, I get up, and in my living room, there's about 15 IRS agents with guns drawn on my dad. And they're there to haul all of our farm equipment away. My dad had gotten in a little tiff with the IRS, and they decided they were going to make an example out of him and take all of his farm equipment. Which, hey, lots of guns. It wasn't right. They didn't have the authority to do that, but you don't, hey, you want to die or you want to lose your farm equipment. So that's at least the way that it comes across. And fear, IRS is one of those scary things, right? Hey, very few people are not afraid of that. But after going through that, and in fact, that did in fact happen. They hauled away our farm equipment. They levied my dad so that he couldn't, they took 100% of any wages that he got. They levied everything in his name. And it stayed that way for almost 5 years. So it changed my life. I quit school, went to work, and supported the family. And I realized very quickly that I wasn't going to be able to support the family as a farmhand. It's the only thing I knew how to do, so I got a job as a farmhand. $4.12 an hour or something like that. Wasn't going to cut it. So, about 30 days in or so, and I've got my first paycheck, which wasn't much. I went and told the farmer I was working for, I said, I'll make you a deal. I'll work for you for free. Don't pay me nothing. But let me use your equipment on the weekends. And so that was my first crazy entrepreneurial venture. He says, oh, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. He said, you'll take care of it and fuel it up and everything. Oh, yeah, I'll take care of it. You just, let me use it on the weekends, and I'll work for you 40 hours a week plus. Won't even, and no problem. So we did that for like 3 years. And nights and weekends, I farmed our own farm that didn't have any equipment. So then we were able to actually support the family, pay the taxes, and all that good stuff. So in many ways, that changed my life and my family's life for the better. A couple major things happened. One is it pulled the family together. Before that, everyone was kind of going their own way. After that, that wasn't the case. We were unified. And it was very, hey, we had a common cause. It wasn't, hey, yeah, the IRS was wrong. Dad was he was black and white guy. They would have probably negotiated, but he said it's either right or it's wrong. Either I owe money or I don't. And, IRS doesn't give you a day in court, so, that's just the way that works. And so after realizing what would look like your worst fears, in reality, it was one of the biggest blessings of my life. Because, hey, I was kind of good at school. I thought I was off, you know. Everyone said, oh yeah, you're going to be college bound, doing all the stuff, right? Probably get into banking or something super exciting like that. Yeah. How much of a blessing is that to folks, guys? You know, who wants to be blessed by a banker? Hey, God. No. So, but it led me to a strong value of the farming life. And very soon I realized, hey, a farmer, and my dad started farming organically in '73. Before it was cool. This was all happening after that. Before that, he sold, even during those years, we sold to Bob Moore, Bob's Red Mill. That was our market. But we looked, and a farmer, there's two things. A farmer holds out both hands, and he says, how much and how much? How much do I pay for stuff? How much do you give me for my stuff? You guys been in that quandary as farmers, even small farmers? There's nothing you control but quantity, which makes bad quality. It incentivizes horrible quality. And then we have the consumer out here, the consumer that would really like food that will keep them slightly healthy, and there's nowhere to go. So the dream that I had 35 years ago was to say, can we find a way to get the farmers that really care with people who really care about what they eat? There are farmers that care about the soil. My granddad used to say the farmer is the guardian of the nation's health. Okay, if we're really the guardian of the nation's health, but then if we grow our grain and we just dump it into the grain bin with everybody else's grain that doesn't give a rip, how much help are we? Not much. So that requires an infrastructure and the building of an infrastructure to be able to do that, to be able to give people who really care about nutrient-dense food that's grown in soil, that's the nutrients that are made from that food come from microbial action in the soil and not some artificial chemical like anhydrous ammonia or something else. And farmers that are growing it that way. And truthfully, being able to give the farmers a little bit more money and negotiate with them on what they're getting paid is a pretty important aspect of that. Then the farmer at least has some aspect. Oh, my food's a little better than that. You know, I'm certified organic. I do all the stuff. I do nutrient-dense food. I follow these protocols. Oh yeah, your food's worth a little more. It's worth more to me. I want my body to take in food that has all the natural occurring minerals, vitamins from the soil, not just, empty carbs and fats. Do we really want that? So I begin to think, in my life, that was a big deal. I was the shy kid, right? I wasn't in school, I was like, scholar, but hey, never raised my hand. No. I always wanted to make sure that, I was background only. So it was a lot. To be able to connect consumers and farmers, you got to do some of these things. You got to actually talk to farmers, negotiate with them, and then you got to go out and actually market. Yeah, it's like, spent a bunch of time going to stores, visiting health food stores, that kind of thing, to create those markets. the fear of doing that, for me, that was a very, very real fear. It was like, this is like, got to talk to people. This is super scary. And you know what? They might tell me, get lost. I ain't buying any of that stuff. And I actually heard that quite a bit. You know, usually in nicer terms than that, but, you know, get lost was a pretty common occurrence because most of the stores are locked into distribution networks. So they're locked into a major distributor. And back then it was a lot less stringent than it is today. Today there's, you know, in the health food industry, organic food industry I should say, there's really only 2 distributors nationwide. And when I started doing this back in the 90s, there were about 35. So that is all consolidated, and created more and more power for those 2 big players. You know, if you as a farmer that maybe is going to create a product, and I want to say don't be scared to do that. If you, if you're starting your farm, small farm, big farm, create a product. Make a product that people can actually use. Commodities farming, its days are over. You know, John mentioned, my neighbor has 30,000 acres that he farms. That's commodities farming. That's the way that that's done. And do you have that? Can you afford that? That's, they've been doing it since actually in my hometown of Dufur. That particular farmer was the great-great-granddaughter of Mr. Dufur. It's like, that farm has been in the family since the town was established. And they've expanded it tremendously, right? And commodities farming is that way. Unless you get into it, unless you were born into it, you may as well forget it. And, I'm not saying it's a great plan anyway, because you're looking at nutrient-deficient food. And that's exactly what is so important to avoid, at least in my opinion. Now let's go one step further with fear. How do we react to fears in our own life, in our own family? I know, I have a lot of kids, right? I have 11 children. And one of the things that faced us early on is, and every young parent faces this, how are you going to work? How are you going to treat your children? Are they going to grow up rambunctious, wild, climbing trees, swimming in the river, and doing all the stuff that kids do depending on where you're at, doing all the chores, doing the work? Are they going to grow up? Are you going to keep them in a little safety bubble? Hey, stay right here. Sit in the house. These video games are pretty good. That's really safe. You won't fall off your bike, especially without a helmet. And you won't get hurt. But are there things in life, for instance, raising your children, are there things in life that are worth more than safety? Are you willing to take a risk with the health, well-being, and safety of your child for the health, well-being, and safety of their spiritual and psychological life? Is that a risk? Let me tell you that Yeah, children are meant to eat dirt. They're meant to play in the garden. They're meant to fall out of trees and all the stuff. Fall off their bikes. None of that is those scars are not lasting. They will get over them. They are not meant to face social problems that even adults have trouble dealing with. And looking at all those things online and trying to figure out, oh, it's such a terrible place. No. They need to have a happy and strong world. And the stronger, we fear, for our children's health. What if they eat dirt? But health begets health. Strength begets strength. So if you have children that are running wild, and I'm not saying completely disobedient. That's a different thing. But if you have children that are running wild and are strong and healthy, they're going to stay strong and healthy. They're going to get stronger, and they're going to get healthier, and they're going to get more robust as they grow into teenagers and young adults. No, they're not going to be the ones that have pains and aches. They're going to have them, but that's going to be because they're sore, and because they fell, or they ran too much, or they did something in real life. There are things in life that are worth taking a risk for. Now I want to bring that down to life on the farm or on the homestead. As we move forward, I've talked to a lot of folks that have gone more rural lately. Great thing. But there's a very strong mix on why did we go rural? Why did we move out of the city or move on to a little farm? And about half tell me that, hey, the government's in a whale of trouble. We look like we're going to have an economic meltdown. People are going to go wild in the city. And I don't want to be there. I want to be somewhere where I'm out and I can raise my own food and do those things. Now, I'm not saying whether or not any of that is true or false. No opinion from my side. I'm saying maybe true, maybe not. I don't know. I have no prediction on how the government's doing. But I do know that if that's the primary motive for starting your homestead and moving out into the country, you're going to get disenchanted pretty fast. Because I tell you what, it's a lot of work. It ties you down, but there's a lot of benefits. Now, if you did it because you wanted the benefits, you wanted a real home, the first part of homestead is a home. Don't forget that. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in, how are the chickens doing, and how's are we going to have enough pasture for the cow, and milking the cow every day, and maybe delivering the milk to the neighbors, or whatever you guys do on your farm. But remember, it's about a home. So living a life of togetherness, starting with our family. If that can bring our family closer together, which it certainly has to us, especially after that original experience that this has been many years ago. But doing that and giving the children responsibilities very young in my house gave them a sense of belonging, and it created a lot of togetherness in our family. I need you. If we say that to our children, and it's not just fake, we're not just saying, oh, you're a good kid. No, I really need you. After all, we've got 3 cows to milk. I can't do that by myself. I need you. Or in the case of my sons, my older sons particularly, we used to pull orders in the warehouse, right? I was just getting Azure started, and very few order pickers, and I was still having trouble balancing that. And then I'd get a big day, and heck, the truck still has to leave. So I'd get my kids out there. Come on, kids, I need you in the warehouse today. You got to pick orders. Yeah. The guys in the warehouse would say, oh, he's sending in the cavalry. That was my kids, right? Okay. But that didn't hurt them. That set them in really good stead for life. And as we look at what is our purpose? Do we have a purpose in what we're doing? Is there something that we care about? Is there something that's more important to us than the fear? Do we have a purpose? Is our purpose to generate help or a better life for other people? Is that, really, when it gets right down to it, our purpose in life has to be something along those lines. We're generating a better life for us, for our family, for our community, and for our larger community, our nation, and our world. Those are the only real objects. Now, that can be done in a million different ways. There is no limit. Tell you the truth, I feel like there is more opportunity today for people who care, that have a purpose than there's ever been in history. We have, at least in the food industry, and you got, if you're on a small farm, that's the place it starts. It's been conglomerated into these big corporate mega food companies. They don't care about anything but corporate profits. Sometimes even if they do have an organic seal on there. Really doesn't make that much difference. Yeah, they probably follow the paperwork. And yeah, it's probably a little better food than what the one without it is. But it's not really what it's about. The marketplace is looking for companies, for people who care. And I dare say that that's true in almost any industry. If you care about the food that you're raising, if we care about the trade that we're doing, and is it more important than the fears that we have from doing that? Are we willing to step out? In my life, it's been a strong, I've had to overcome fear more and more and more times. I started as a shy kid that figured I needed to market our farm products, right? It was me, myself, and I. Yeah, that's it. And every time I had to give responsibility away, I had to train somebody new to do that, there's a little piece of you that's absolutely terrified. And you do it. Can you change that role from being, driving the truck? I used to drive the truck for years, do deliveries and stuff. You go from driving the truck to managing a fleet of truck drivers, that's dang scary. You talk about the regulatory stuff that goes along with that, yeah, that's even scarier. And in my life, I went from a company of one, to now we're 350 people in Azure. And it happened over years. It didn't happen in one day. You don't have to learn all that, but every single time that we make that change so that we can help more people, in our purpose, there is a huge fear that comes into play, at least most of the time in my life. You know, it's not like, you know, they say, oh, well, you're so lucky, you know, you have a whole big team and all that. Yeah, well, it doesn't work that way. I will tell you, luck has absolutely nothing to do with it. That's a zero. No. Now, faith may have something to do with it. Purpose has something to do with it. The blessings of God might have something to do with it. Luck, not so much. As you move forward, there's two things to keep in mind. Number one, how can I bless my fellow man, other people? And I'm not saying that doesn't include yourself and your family. It does. But how can I bless other people? How can I be a larger blessing? That's purpose, and that's faith. How can I hide in the shadows, stay under the radar? That's fear. And you know, sometimes you have to deal with regulatory agencies head on. I'm not saying that you won't. You will. And that may sound scary, but it's really not as scary as it is a pain in the butt. It really is more that. Just 2 weeks ago, I spent 4 days with the FDA on just one little thing. You know, we have this little cannery line, right? I employ 3 people there. This is like, we can, you know, pickles and some tomato products and stuff like that on this cannery line. So in the little corner up by our apple packing line, FDA decided, oh, we're going to check that out. We're going to check every piece of paper that you've ever done. You know, heck, it's a pain in the butt. 4 days out of your life that they get to go, oh, yeah. Did you do just this right? Yeah. Did you record the temperature? Yeah. Oh, that's right. Is that just right? You know, yeah. It's more of a pain in the butt. It's not really that scary. Those guys really don't have much authority except the authority that the industry gave them. And remember that most of regulation has been made to keep you guys down as small farmers. It's the big corporate interests that have lobbied Congress to say, hey, regulate canning companies, regulate dairies, no raw milk. Oh, yeah. You don't want raw milk because the cheese industry in the state, you guys could hurt them. You could take a big chunk out of their profits because you do better stuff than they do. You know, I don't know what the dairy company is here in Ohio. I should have looked that up. But in Oregon, it's Tillamook, right? Tillamook cheese, Tillamook milk, all the stuff. And they lobbied the state of Oregon legislature to say, hey, no raw milk in this state. It's not because the legislature gives a rip. The industry lobbied the state to create the agencies to keep you down. How about you lobby the state to keep them down? There's more of you. Change it. We don't need to fly under the radar. We don't need to be afraid. We need to build community. Get with your neighbors. Make friends with your neighbors that are slightly of like mind. Learn to work on a common purpose, if you can. And of course, have a purpose. Faith and purpose will always win if you're able to kick fear out. And I'm not saying that we have no fear. Remember, maybe it was a John Wayne quote or something that says, you know, courage is being terrified and saddling up anyway. Remember, sometimes we have to go through that bad thing. We have to get bucked off and feel what the ground feels like. And it may not feel exactly good, but we realize that it's not really that bad either. We can survive it. And if our purpose is strong enough that we're willing to take some lumps, some pain, to make that purpose become a reality and a dream. That's what I want to encourage everyone to do, is to think. There's a lot of you folks out here. If every one of you creates a livelihood, a business with purpose to change the world in whatever area that you're working, there's a lot of momentum. Those corporate giants won't even know what happened to them. They really won't. It's not, they're all just employees. They're just employees of that corporate monolith. There's not a lot of loyalty there. No, it's not incredibly difficult to win. We just have to tell our story, tell why, and we have to be willing to do things we're not comfortable with, like marketing, like sales, like communication, and sometimes getting our hands dirty. That's just, it's the way that it goes. And hey, I'm very, and Azure, one of our primary core values at Azure is to support independent and family-owned businesses and companies. And we do want to do that as well. So we are here as a support to any of you guys. You start, at least in the food industry, if you start something and you need an alternative to those big boys that really couldn't give a rip about you, that's partly why we're here. And so, reach out. I invite any of you. And I will definitely be around the rest of the day. We have a booth down, I think it's at the end of Tent B. I'd love to see and meet any of you. Thank you for your time and blessings.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, David. So, he said that we should overcome our fears, right? And do things with purpose. So I have a question for you. Are there any strong vocalists in the audience? Oh, come on. A crowd this size, there's got to be one. Have no fear. Okay. Meet me backstage, okay? You can just slip out, pretend you're going to the bathroom, okay? Now I'm going to get a little bit riskier. Is there anybody that can do kind of a dance routine? I know we're in Amish country, but okay. Okay, we got a volunteer. Meet me backstage. We want audience participation. We don't want to hide talents under bushels. We want people to take risks. Okay, so I have a summit guide here that is well used. It has extensive handwritten notes, especially on the one by Neal Kinsey. It's written all over. So someone found this, and I'm sure the person that spent all that time taking notes would like to have it. You can, again, retrieve it from backstage. Okay, we have more speakers. Next up, we have Codi and Michelle Knox. They have a YouTube channel named More Than Farmers. They also have an Instagram following. So between the two of them, they're over 500,000. Today, you get to see them in person. They're going to be speaking to you next, talking about why they do what they do, but I ask them if they have something that their followers don't know. So Michelle's actually an artist. You know, I've always admired people that can take a lead pencil and just start sketching and all of a sudden something jumps off the page. That's not me. I'm an engineer. I used to work with a designer, and he'd do this. Well, John, we're gonna make something. It's gonna look something like this. You know, and 5 minutes later, we had a very artistic automotive part that you couldn't possibly manufacture, but it looked good. His name was Robert Ballard. He was a Frenchman, and I said, he was French, and of course I have a German background. I said, here's how we're going to do it. You stay on your side of the Rhine, and I'm going to stay on my side of the Rhine. You sketch it up, and I'll make sure that we can make it without breaking the bank. So she's an artist. She graduated from sketching to watercolor, and so you can talk to her about that. Now, Codi, on the other hand, is a skateboarder. I said, where's your board? He didn't bring it. Don't you think he should do some rendition of skateboarding when he comes up on stage? You agree with me? I mean, he didn't bring his board, but he's got to do some kind of routine to make his entry. Please welcome Codi and Michelle Knox.
I did wear my skate shoes to speak up here. Yeah. I really appreciated David's talk, and when I saw the title of it, I was a little bit afraid that he was going to steal our thunder. We're not talking about faith over fear specifically, but that idea comes through in a lot of what we do and what we talk about in our YouTube videos and stuff. So anyways, I really appreciated that. I'm Codi. This is my lovely wife, Michelle.
Hello.
We have 4 children. We homestead here in Ohio, a couple hours away. We've got 5.5 acres. We raise a large percentage of the food that we eat in our home, probably about 75%. We grow all of our own beef, milk, eggs, chicken, vegetables, berries. Still working on fruit trees. We'd like to have more fruit on our homestead. And lost my train of thought there. And we're also thinking of adding sheep later this year. We'll see how that goes once. We're full-time content creators, and we're sharing what we wish we would have known when we first started homesteading, because in those beginning stages of homesteading, we went through a lot of hard times, hard things. We had health issues, depression, marriage problems, money problems. And so the title of our talk this morning is Being More Than Farmers, but before we talk about what that means to us, I think we need to go back and tell you a little bit of our story so you can understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, so ever since I was a teenager, I've just loved gardening. I've been so passionate about it, and that just really followed me on into our marriage, and eventually I managed to pull Codi on board with me. So I just love the homesteading lifestyle. I love taking part in the process of putting food in front of my family. There's just nothing more fulfilling in life for me than that. I also love how homesteading keeps us in tune with the seasons automatically. So we automatically eat seasonally, we automatically watch weather patterns, and it just keeps us in tune with what's happening in nature, which is something that I feel like our nation is losing. We believe that growing food is normal, it's natural, it's attainable, and after some really hard life lessons, we have figured out how to grow our own food without it completely consuming our lives. And our passion is just to share that with other people, to share how you can be more self-sufficient without completely burning out like we did. I feel like we made all the mistakes so that you guys don't have to.
Right. Yeah. Michelle did grow up gardening, but I definitely did not. I was a country boy. I rode horses. I worked in my dad's cabinet shop. And then I was also part-time skater punk, like John said. And to give you a little idea of the gardening knowledge that I had, the first time that I saw Michelle take a piece of a potato and put it in the ground, I asked her what the point was of planting one potato just to get another potato back. And needless to say, she did laugh at me. My diet was about as bad as it could be. My favorite breakfast food was Pop-Tarts. And as you can imagine, along with that came something like teeth problems, I kind of dealt with that like most of my life, but it kept getting worse. I ended up getting all of the molars pulled out of one side of my mouth. That was kind of the beginning of the wake-up call for me. And then around that time also, I heard that my cousin was excited to be going to be an intern at Joel Salatin's Polyface Farms. Now, to be honest, I thought that was a little weird. Like, who would be excited about becoming a farmer? But also around that time, we had our first child. Our first baby was born. And I guess something started in me that I started to realize that I wanted something more for myself, for our future family. And so all of those things put together, it was this perfect storm for a dream to be born in us. And the thing was, though, is we were living in a basement apartment, and living in a basement apartment like that, it looked like a very impossible dream to start homesteading. But we got started in the best way that we figured out that we could. We started buying raw milk. We bought dry goods in bulk. We did a little gardening at a friend's house, and we canned some of that stuff. And so we were learning those homesteading skills before we actually had the homestead. And that's one thing that I would recommend to anybody that wants to get started. Start learning those skills as soon as possible. Fast forward another year, and we took the plunge, bought a piece of property with the goal to build our own house and to build a homestead. And that was kind of really the start of getting into major overwhelm and burnout for us. And I'm going to have to kind of condense this story of how this all came about. But we moved out of our apartment into an old leaky camper, and that was very not ideal whatsoever with a 1-year-old and another baby on the way. But we made it work. We had to do that because we couldn't afford loan payments and rent payments at the same time. And I was building the house basically by myself with some help from family. We did some church frolics and stuff, but I was working on it myself while holding down a full-time job. And while we were building the house, we were also trying to get our homestead started. Not recommended. And then when we were basically done building the house, we dove right into doing farmers markets. All of those things was just too much. Our marriage got put on the back burner. I was missing out on my kids' lives and things like that. And it ended up becoming one of the darkest times in our lives and in our marriage.
Yeah. So through that dark season of our lives, homesteading was really what kept us together, very literally. And there were so many things in our life that were too triggering to talk about, and so we just didn't talk about much of anything. But that passion for homesteading is really what kept us going. So as Cody mentioned before, we dove in head first into this homesteading lifestyle, and I planted a massive garden. It was an unsuccessful garden because the soil wasn't good, but I planted it with the intentions of selling food at a farmer's market and also, feeding my own family. But after a few years of this hectic lifestyle, my health really started to decline, and after I had my third baby, it just completely tanked. It was all I could do to get up in the morning, and my babies were the reason that I got up in the morning. I couldn't handle any stress, and it was becoming obvious that I was on the edge of a mental breakdown. So I was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue, and I had 3 babies in diapers. So we decided to give up our farmer's market. Cody just really focused on his full-time job and making money, and I just kind of reined back and just focused on taking care of my babies and also just growing food for us. We never actually completely quit homesteading, but we did consider it over that time, and God really got our attention over this time. We got lots of counseling and therapy, and as we became healthier people, we started recognizing our limitations. We started saying no even to good things. And the crazy thing is that as we became more efficient and more streamlined, we weren't always a day late and a dollar short. And we were able to then pull more of those homesteading things back into our lives that we had given up before.
Yeah, and so maybe like us, you feel like you are always a day late and a dollar short. Maybe you feel like all the homesteading chores you have it's too much. It's weighing you down. It's consuming you. Or maybe you're even just scared to plunge into this homesteading lifestyle because of all the work that you know will be coming, and you don't want to be so tied down. And I want you to know that we get that. We've been there. We understand it. But I also want you to know that there is hope, and our story didn't stay there. So we still hadn't lost the dream of building the house, building our homestead, and building a business of making so that I could quit my job and come and work from home. We considered a number of things, but I got a couple of nudges to make YouTube videos. Some of them were kind of out of the blue, but got a couple of nudges, and that's finally where we landed on. 3 years ago, we shot our first YouTube video. It took a solid 2 years of grinding, day in and day out. I was working a full-time job, and basically another full-time job creating videos. And before we made any kind of money worth talking about, it took us 2 years. Once it started taking off, it did snowball pretty quickly after that. 6 months later, I took a leap of faith, quit my day job, and now we're working together at home, and we're doing what we love, and we're sharing this life together. We definitely don't feel like we have arrived, but we have reached some of those goals that we had. And so now we want to go into talking just a little bit about some of the mindsets that we had, some of the actions that we took to get us through those times and to get us to where we are today.
Yeah, so first of all, I think a really important piece in this homesteading overwhelm discussion is why you're homesteading. So one thing that we very quickly realized after we became content creators and started posting on YouTube is that there's a crazy amount of fear that's just like woven into the homesteading community. Codi put up a community post on our channel just to see why people were coming to our channel, why were people wanting to learn to homestead. And the question that he posted was this: what's the biggest reason that you want to homestead? Number 1, to spend more of life with your family. Number 2, healthy food, healthy lifestyle. And number 3, peace and security in a crazy world. And out of the 1,000 people that voted on that, 10% voted spend more of time with my family, 34% voted healthy food, healthy lifestyle, and 56% voted peace and security in a crazy world. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with wanting peace and security in a crazy world. There's nothing wrong with wanting to opt out of a system that's flawed. I'm right there with you all. But the point that I really want to make is that the opposite of peace and security is fear and instability, fear and insecurity. And it was very obvious that a lot of people are feeling that. And there's just so much talk of all the horrible things that could happen in the world, all the reasons that you absolutely need to have a basement full of food, you absolutely have to be more self-sustainable. And so many people just respond to this fear narrative by just panicking and jumping into this homesteading lifestyle. And I think when your main motivation is fear, and then you are just going to, all the joy is just going to be sucked right out of the process of your homesteading. Fear is actually a really good motivator. It can be a good motivator, but it's also paralyzing. And scared people are very easy to control, and that's the exact opposite of what you're trying to accomplish with your homesteading goals. So if your reason for homesteading is to opt out of a system that's flawed, I think that's wonderful, but just choose to immerse yourself in the beauty and the awe and the excitement of the process. My favorite thing about gardening is just the fact that when I'm in my garden, I feel like I'm partnering with nature, I'm partnering with God to put food in front of my family, and that is true fulfillment, that is true motivation. So I would just encourage you to let go of that sense of duty and homestead because you want to and not because you're scared not to.
The why of homesteading is very important. Then once you figure out your why, you're also going to have to figure out how you're going to homestead. And it's not the kind of how, I'm not talking about the kind of how like you're going to look up a how-to video on YouTube. The kind of how of more like how you're going to prioritize and live your life. So when we jumped into this homesteading thing, we wanted to do all the things at once. And we ended up burning out and we had to take a step back. And ever since then, we've never really like gotten to the place where we're adding in more and more and more things. And so sometimes when I look at other homesteading channels on YouTube, I feel a little bit less than, maybe. We're doing milk, beef, eggs, but we're not doing pork and goats and sheep and emus and rabbits and just all the things. And, you know, I see some people planting hundreds of tomato plants, hundreds of pepper plants. We're not doing that much stuff. But we realize that we could do more things now with where we're at. But we've come to the place where we've decided we want to be able to stop and enjoy consuming the things that we're growing and not just be consumed by the things that we're growing. So to us, and we've also learned that mastering one skill before moving on to another thing is very important and very key to avoiding overwhelm. So I'm going to use a cow as an example. when we were first getting started, learning how to take care of chickens and take on a bigger garden and stuff like that, we bought a milk cow. I absolutely love my milk cow. It's my favorite thing on our homestead. But a milk cow in and of itself can be very, very stressful. So at the time that I was trying to figure out why my chickens weren't laying well enough to have enough eggs to take to farmer's market and sell there, and figuring out all the garden problems and things like that, I was also learning how to hand milk and take care of a milk cow. So it was like extra, extra stressful. So big thing is to just master the smaller things before you move on to the bigger things.
Yeah, another reason also that you might be feeling stressed is just simply because you are lacking community. With the internet, it's so easy to Google things, and I mean, I'm guilty of this. I do it all the time. Yeah, it's not a problem. But I also would just encourage you to not completely let go of in-person relationships for that online community, because any kind of online teacher or influencer in today's world is going to have to cover their backside to some extent. We just do. There's a lot of crazy people in the world, and as a content creator myself, I completely understand this. I'm not going to take a piece of controversial information, and honestly, there's quite a lot of controversial information. I mean, we homesteaders live life on the edge. But take canning, for instance. I'm not going to take some canning information and just whittle it down to its simplest form and hand it to an inexperienced audience who might take that information and misunderstand it and carry it out wrongly. I have far too much to lose in order to do that. And so everything on the internet, with very few exceptions, is going to go above and beyond all of the necessary precautions and regulations, all the things, just to make sure that it's for sure safe, because everyone's trying to cover themselves. I consider myself a safe canner. I've been canning for 20 years. I have those canning instincts, but when I go onto the USDA website, some of those regulations are insane to me. Like, I don't follow them all, but I have those canning instincts. I'm not necessarily going to tell an inexperienced audience to just ignore regulations. I can't do that, because people on the internet can be kind of crazy. And if you don't believe me, a couple months ago, I posted a reel on my Instagram. For those of you who don't know what a reel is, it's essentially just like a shortened YouTube video. And the first line of this video was, "When our cow is eating spring grass, I make enough butter to last us through the winter." And out of the 8 million people who saw that reel, a very large percentage of them thought I said cat instead of cow. And so all of a sudden, I became this crazy person who was milking cats and making cat butter. And I'm literally not joking. In one of the comment threads, there was a bunch of very concerned people who were discussing whether or not it's even possible to milk a cat. And the general consensus toward the end was that no matter how small the animal, as long as it has teats, you can milk it. So all that to say, content creators, we really have to cover our backs. And so if you're confused on an issue, and then I would encourage you to find a real in-person person to help you demystify that issue. In my opinion, real-life relationships are essential for your mental well-being.
For sure. And another thing that can contribute to overwhelm, keep you drowning in overwhelm, is sometimes your ideals can keep you from success. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. Sometimes your ideals can very easily keep you from success. So one of the reasons that a lot of us start homesteading is because of our high ideals. And some of those ideals are very important, and we need to hold on to some of those, but we also have to be careful. When we first started our egg business, I wanted to use only heritage breed chickens for our egg-laying flock. Now, if you just want to have a small flock of chickens to provide eggs for your family, that's okay, totally fine. But if you're wanting to have a business and it needs to be efficient, it needs to make money, it wasn't practical. Hybrid hens will just lay much better than a heritage breed chicken. Now, there's nothing morally wrong with hybrid hens, but it went against one of my ideals. It didn't take us too long to figure out that that was an ideal we needed to let go of, and we started making more money with our egg business. We also planted some apple trees not long after we started our homestead, and I also had an ideal that I only wanted to plant heirloom varieties. Now, this was mentioned earlier. It is really hard to grow organic apples. And in Ohio, because of the climate here, we have a lot of disease problems with apples. And it would have really helped in the beginning to plant disease-resistant varieties. So then several years after I planted these heirloom apple trees, they're nice and established, but they've got disease problems. I ended up pulling a couple of them out and replacing them with some disease-resistant hybrid varieties. So some of our ideals are really good. Some of those you want to hold on to, but make sure you look at which ones might be a little bit too high and might be holding you back, because me personally, I would rather have an organically raised hybrid apple than no apples at all.
Yeah. So now we're just going to run through some really quick, like rapid fire, practical things that we do on our homestead to keep us out of overwhelm and burnout. Number one is the backbone of everything I grow in my garden are things that don't have to be processed. They don't have to be put into jars or put into the freezer. So I focus on white potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, butternut squash. You can do pumpkins, carrots, things that you can just cure on your porch and put directly into a cold room or a root cellar. And you can take a huge chunk out of your self-sufficiency goals with those foods, and it takes no processing whatsoever. Some other things that you can do are things like dried beans, dent corn, popcorn, things that you don't have to take a bunch of time in a hot, sweaty kitchen processing. Number two, at this season in my life, I don't do winter gardening. I think it's great, but for me, with my past health issues, I just discovered the importance of rest. And so during the wintertime, I rest and I homeschool. I don't either do like season extensions, as in like having a greenhouse. Like I said, I think those things are great, but we just grow enough food in the spring and summer to last us all through the winter so that we don't have to do that winter gardening season extension stuff. And it really makes so that I can rest and recharge for the next season while homeschooling, which brings me to my third point. I only homeschool in the off gardening season. So I don't try to homeschool and garden at the same time. I homeschool from October through May, which is a pretty short season for official homeschool, but I double up, we just make it work. And number four, it's okay to have skills in your tool bag that you don't always use like on a normal basis. So I have learned to just really let go of guilt. For example, I know how to make cheese, but I don't always use that skill because I don't always have time. And I just for sure want to have time to prioritize my family and doing fun things like kayaking and hiking and all the things that kids like to do. So.
Yes, and a couple of quick tips from me. In general, overall, always be looking for ways to make things more efficient, to simplify, to make things so simple that anybody can do your chores. We had to have 2 different people do our chores for us to be here the last couple of days, and it's people that, I mean, they've done it before, they kind of know what they're doing, but they don't do those kind of chores every single day. They're not used to it, and so I need to make it as simple as possible to make it as easy as possible for them. That not only makes it easier in that case, but it also just makes it easier for me in the day in and day out. And one of the biggest things that we've done on our homestead, I feel like, is if you have a milk cow, do once a day milking. You will still end up with way more milk than you need as a family, and it will really free you up. The thing of, we started out twice a day milking, being tied down morning and evening every day just really keeps you stuck. I use round bales in the winter so that I don't have to toss hay out every single day when it's cold and blizzards and stuff going on. A round bale can sit there for a few weeks. I use permanent paddocks for my rotational grazing. Sorry. I have a single strand of electric wire for my dividing fences, and it's all connected to a front area where their water is. So I don't have to take water to different places for my cow. It's in the same place every time. And then when I want to rotate my cow, I just close the gate that they were in, open the next gate, and cows are rotated. Very simple. And if you do have electric fencing, this is just a small tip, whatever. Get a post puller. It really saved me a lot of work. I put it off for a long time because it was like $40, super expensive tool, but it just saved so much. Get a post puller. And trust me, if you have electric fences, you will need to move them sometime. Put in automatic lights for chickens. In the winter, we use lights to extend the daylight hours so they lay better, and it made a big difference getting automatic lights because it's a real pain to have to try to be out there at the exact same time every morning and every evening, turning those lights on and off. Use quick connect fittings for hoses. Get a wheel hoe to use in the garden. That saves a lot of time. And Michelle already said this, but just want to reiterate, talk to real live people as much as possible, who have done this for years. There's a lot of wisdom there, and you will be a lot farther, a lot faster that way.
Yeah. So I'm a happy and healthy person now, but in my journey back to health after 10 years of adrenal fatigue and hormone issues, I met so many people, especially women, who were in the exact same boat as I was. And as I talked with these women, I started hearing a lot of common denominators in the things that in their stories. And some of those common denominators were chronic stress, mental load, marriage issues, overwhelm, grief, trauma. And what I started recognizing is that you can eat all the right foods, you can put all the right foods into your body, and you can still be an incredibly unhappy and unhealthy person because your stressful lifestyle is destroying you from the inside out. I believe in healthy food to the extent that I have devoted a large percentage of my life to living off the land, cooking from scratch. But the times in my life where I made the biggest strides in my health were never food. They were always lifestyle shifts.
Right. So to boil it down, to bring it down to what it means to being more than farmers, I want to first of all say that being more than farmers is not a slam to farmers at all. Unfortunately, a few people online have taken that phrase the wrong way, thinking we're better than farmers. But it's not like that. We are proud to be cultivators of the land and proud to be providing food for ourselves and for our family. So being more than farmers is being able to live your homestead dream and still having the space to take care of your health and enjoy other parts of life. If the weight of homesteading controls and consumes you, it won't be very long until you're ready to give it up. I still like to skateboard and snowboard. I like to go hiking and kayaking and spend time with friends and family, and we gave those kinds of things up for so long, and we put our marriage on the back burner, but we finally came to the place where we realized that that's not what we wanted for ourselves. That's not what we wanted for our children, and so we had to take a step back and learn how to become more than farmers. Thank you for having us.
Give it up for Codi and Michelle. That dangling microphone. Okay, we got it? All right. You heard what David said, right? Mr. David Stelzer. We have to conquer our fears. Faith over fear. Well, I'm having you know we've got some people of faith in this crowd, and you're going to be amazed at what they're going to be doing. I'm not impressed with the clapping. I'm even less impressed. Come backstage and I'm going to be impressed. Who has sung in a choir? Look at that. Come backstage, guys. Or you can shrink in fear. All right, we are bringing back Neal Kinsey. He was here yesterday. He's going to be talking about solving specific problems in the garden by correcting fertility needs. I mean, this is a real scientist. He has consulted in 80 different countries on agricultural needs, and he's visited 40 countries. More precisely, since 1976, he has made 26 trips to Australia and stayed there for 2 to 3 weeks. So this is a real treat to have him here. He's going to be on this stage in the afternoon from 2 to 4, more one-on-one. So please welcome to the stage Mr. Neal Kinsey. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. When I was less of a That's great.
You gotta see. Got another one.
Okay, must be back there. I'll keep talking, and if we don't solve it, we'll get another one. First of all, if I yell, can you hear me at the back? First of all, I'll say that it's a pleasure to be here, and my favorite hobby is gardening. I like to grow plants. I grew up growing plants. Before the bus came in the morning, I went out and took a hoe in the springtime and hoed through the garden. My dad didn't tell me I had to do that. I enjoyed doing that. Also, I enjoy eating homegrown foods. And I think the quality of growing your own, it's not just a matter of being fresh. It's a matter of you can influence the nutritional value of what you eat if you have the soil and start looking to see what that soil needs. If you think that doesn't make any difference, I had one, I think I mentioned this even yesterday, but had one dairyman in New Zealand that we started working with, and just by going in and correcting the soils in his pastures, his veterinarian bill for 1,300 cows went from $110,000 down to less than $10,000 in 1 year. If you can change the health of livestock on grass that quickly, what can you do if you also start putting the nutrients that are needed in your garden to supply what we need? Now, you know, in growing up, I didn't know these principles. I grew up on a farm, but we just thought, put on more manure. Put on more manure, that's what you need for a garden. Or put on, we use manure, not compost, because we didn't know what composting was. I didn't really learn about composting until I went off to college. But this morning, I just want to say that in starting this business, I had a number of people that came to me and said, well, you know what you're doing, you're never going to grow that big. Because my idea was, the more I could learn and share with whoever was a client, the better job they could do. And a lot of people said, when you do that, they don't need you anymore. Well, you know, first of all, what I would say is, if we can teach people that they don't need you anymore, there's still plenty of other people out there that do. And secondly, what I found was, when you start teaching people what they need to do, they say, there's so much to remember. I need to have you make sure you help us to do this right. Because that's what I do all the time. Well, I didn't get in this to get big. I got in this because I enjoyed doing it. And just the concept of saying you're willing to give as much information as possible. You know what I found out? I've learned more stuff. Because people find out when you're willing to share, they'll share back. That's how I learned a lot of the things that I learned today. And a lot of these solving specific problems, it was somebody who came and told me about it. So it's not a matter of having to know everything. I'm not going to go into the company history that much except to say we make our living selling advice. That's all we do. We don't sell fertilizers. Now, I'm not against people who sell fertilizers. I mean, we need them. I'm not even against people who are consultants and sell fertilizer. It's just a matter that when I started, I determined I don't want people to think I'm making a recommendation because we've got that to sell and we're trying to make money on it. I want it to be something where we promote quality, and by the educational things that we do and the benefits that they see, that stimulates them to come back. We don't call someone on the phone and say, oh, by the way, you haven't soil tested in a year or so. We don't send newsletters out. We try to teach the people the value of soil testing so that they make the decision. You're the manager and I'm an advisor. I'm not going to call anybody up and say, oh, you need to soil test again. You know why? It's easy to talk somebody into pulling a soil test. What's hard is to get them to do what they need to do to make that work. And today we're not going to talk all about that. And as a matter of fact, I put on 3-day courses to try to teach people how the fertility in soil works. And I'd do it in 3 hours if I could, but I don't know how. Actually, we have 4 different 3-day courses just to get through all the various things you have to face if you're going to be a consultant. to help other people understand. How does your garden grow? When you start looking at soils and so forth, is all of the soil the same in your garden? Does it all appear the same? If it does, then one soil sample will probably suffice. But what if you got a little corner over there and everything else is growing real well, but that corner doesn't grow so well? A lot of people say, if you want a soil sample, take an average of everything, so they'll go over and take a probe of soil out of that bad part and stick it in with the good. That just skews the sample. If you've got what to do, if you're going to take one sample, look and see which part you're most concerned with. Take that sample and send it as a separate sample. Have that analyzed and treat that, because every difference you see generally has a different mineral makeup. The different color, the different slope, the different kinds of weeds or grass that grow there, any kind of difference you see. So when we ask, how does your garden grow? You know, some people will take a sample out of their garden and the high side weedy and the low side not so weedy. Well, it's a good idea in those kind of cases to take it out of one or the other, because the part that's weedy has a different kind of nutrient makeup than the part that's not. And we see this in farmers' fields, we see this in gardens, we see this everywhere. When you see a different kind of weed or grass grow, it's because there's different nutrition in that soil. When you see a place that grows your vegetables really well, it's because the nutrition is closer in that soil than in a place where you have problems. For the first 5 years when I started this, I specialized in problem soil. That's what we worked with, because the man that trained me, Dr. William Albrecht, said, now, Neal, you're not, you know, when you go out and start consulting, whoever signs up with you, they got a problem. They might not tell you they have a problem, but they're going to have a problem. And I said, why do you say that? And he said, because the university does free soil tests. They're not going to pay you for a soil test unless they haven't gotten the answer they need. And for 5 years, I thought, woe is me. All I get's all these old problem soils. I'd like to work on some good soil. You know what? It was the best education you could have, because when you found out you could fix those problems, then you knew you could fix the other things as well. That's where, as far as I'm concerned, that's where growing is the first key. Getting something to grow, but once you get that to grow, what are you growing? Are you growing the best quality you can, or just growing something because it looks good? My aunt grew a terrific garden. I stayed with my aunt, my great aunt and great uncle. I actually rented a bedroom from them when I was going to the first 2 years of college. The garden looked great. The food tasted terrible. It was bitter. I never ate cooked turnips at home. I ate raw turnips, but she fixed cooked turnips. When I'd eat those turnips, yuck. I can't stand that stuff. It was, you know, but later on when I tasted some cooked turnips that my wife made, man, that's good. If you grow something and it doesn't taste right, there's something wrong. Just the question is, what is it? Sometimes it's too much of something. Sometimes it's too little of something. Sometimes it's both. Most of the time it's both. Now, we talked about this yesterday, but this is an optimum. If you can get a ratio in terms of, I say ratios, we don't really work on ratios, we work on percentages, but if you can get your percentage of calcium and magnesium and potassium, this is, once you get within these ranges, both soils will do its best. Sandy soil need a little bit more of magnesium versus calcium, and clay soil need more calcium versus magnesium. But if you've got a soil that falls in these ranges, on the soil test that we do, we know you're going to grow a good garden. We know you're going to grow good crops there. Magnesium deficiency, if you're below 10% on the, now, here's the problem. A soil test only gives you the way that particular laboratory has designed to do their test. In other words, what I'm saying there is, we've got all this big equipment that you got to use to do a soil test with. Well, you got to have some soil to set that equipment by, or to calibrate it by. It's like the old FM radios. Maybe my being 80, you may not remember this, but used to, we didn't listen to FM radio very much because you always had to retune it. You'd get it on, it'd sort of drift off, and then you had to go back and tune it back in again. FM doesn't do that anymore, but it used to. Well, that's the same thing with if you're running soil tests all day, you got to calibrate those machines 2 or 3 times a day. You got to have some soil to calibrate it by, to get 0 back to 0 or 1 back to 1, whatever you might say. Every laboratory has to have a soil to do that, but there's no mandatory soil from the U.S. government that says, everybody use this soil. So when they recalibrate their machines, the numbers come out different from one soil test laboratory to another. The numbers that we have on our tests don't come the same from someplace else. It isn't that they're wrong and we're right. It's a matter that you have to know what those numbers mean when you go out onto the soil. And I was able to study under a man who used the same testing mechanisms for 50 years before I ever got to study under him. And he said, based on the test, as long as you do it this way, these are what the numbers ought to be. And he also said, and don't try to interpret that for some other soil test because you'll be wrong. And over 50 years of consulting, every time I've tried to use somebody else's soil test to tell them what to do, because somebody will come along and convince me, every time from what they did and then knowing what they should have done once we do the right test, I've been wrong every time. I wish I could read every soil test in the world, but I can't. And the soil test is what tells me what needs to be done to a soil. And I wish I could just walk out in the field and look at it and say, oh, you need to do this, this, and this. Well, you know, you can look at a problem. You can go out and look at a field and say, oh, you've got this problem. But what we can't tell you is how many pounds of whatever it is that's a problem it takes to correct that soil. Because a sandy soil is like trying to put, if you got a sandy soil, let's say that's like a cup of coffee. And you got a clay soil, it has 10 times more holding capacity, so that's like a coffee pot. All right, if it takes a teaspoon of sugar in your cup of coffee, it's going to take 10 teaspoons to do the same if you're trying to sweeten that pot of coffee. Do we have a coffee pot? Do we have a cup? Or do we have a barrel? Each one takes a different amount because it's not how many pounds you put in or how many ounces. It's what percentage of saturation you get. The percentage of sugar saturation determines how sweet it is. That's the problem in terms of we don't know when we look at a soil and say, oh, you've got a zinc deficiency. Well, do we need 10 pounds of zinc sulfate to solve that problem? Or do we need 20 pounds or do we need 35 pounds? It's not so cut and dried because, first of all, we have to know the capacity of the soil. Do you have a teacup? Do you have a coffee pot? Do you have a barrel? Once we get that, then we start looking at the percentages. We did this, we said this yesterday, and I'll put it in case some of you, I didn't know how many would be at one time and the other. Foliar magnesium for garden plants. If you wonder whether or not you have too little or too much magnesium, this is not going to hurt you. It's not going to be too much. It's not going to hurt the plants. It's just a matter of will you see a response or not. Take 1 tablespoon of Epsom salts, which is 11% magnesium. And as I explained yesterday, most soils have either too little or too much magnesium in the soil. We don't have soil that generally have the right amount. It's just a matter of that's the way the mineral content's made up. But unless you have on a clay soil 10 to 12% magnesium, if it's below 10, you're going to have a magnesium deficiency. If it's above 12, you're going to have a magnesium deficiency for 2 different reasons. When it's below 10, magnesium is deficient in the soil. When it's above 12, magnesium is so excessive it restricts the aeration in the soil. The microbes can't do their job to get the magnesium into the plant. And you can do a plant analysis and find out that food crops are the worst at having to have this true level. And if we have more than that, we don't have enough magnesium. Well, if you don't have that situation in your garden, take a tablespoon of Epsom salts, put it in a gallon of water, use a little pump-up sprayer, go out there and spray on the leaves of your crop. We use green beans as the example because that's a real good way in a garden to find out if you're short on magnesium. If you plant green beans, they come up this tall, and they've got something start chewing holes in the leaf, whether it's a worm or a bug or whatever it is. Go out there and spray this on, and they'll quit. I mean, they'll quit. for about 2 to 3 weeks. No, sorry, for about 3 to 4 weeks. And then if, in 3 to 4 weeks, if you start seeing holes come in there again, it's time to go back out there and spray that same amount again. Sometimes you have to do it 3 or 4 times a year. But here's the thing. Even if you put on something that you don't see holes in the leaves, watch those plants, because in 3 days, if you're short on magnesium, they'll turn greener. I don't care how green they look. If you're short on magnesium, they're going to get greener, because that magnesium is the center of the chlorophyll, and you need the magnesium for the nitrogen to work properly to build the food for the plant. Anything that's worth doing is worth doing right. The real long-term solutions are not normally the easiest to accomplish. You have to put some effort to help even the best solutions work properly. We may be able to tell you the answer, oh, you're short on this, but then the next thing is you got to go find the right material. Because there are a lot of people that say, oh, you don't need that. And especially when it comes to micronutrients, because most people don't know how much micronutrient you need in your garden anyway. They may act like they do, but they really don't know what that soil test has to be. And if they do know what the soil test has to be, and it's not there, I've had lab chemists from laboratories come and tell me, we don't know how to tell them how many pounds they need. We just say, well, you're deficient, so put on this much, and then we test it next year, and if they're still deficient, we'll put that much more on until you finally get to where it's not deficient. A soil test that's exact can tell you how many pounds of each micronutrient you need in order to get that test to the right place. It's then a matter of finding it and putting it on. It's not hard, generally, it's not hard to find unless you need something like cobalt sulfate. Cobalt sulfate is something that some gardeners do need because cobalt's necessary for the microbes in the soil. As a matter of fact, cobalt's necessary for digestion in the body. In New Zealand, when the British first settled New Zealand, they brought their cattle over, they had grass up to the bellies of the cows. New Zealanders will still tell you this story about their ancestors. They had grass up to the belly of the cows. They said, look at all this pasture we've got. We've got a great place here to grow beef cattle or dairy or whatever. The cows would eat that grass up to their bellies and starve to death, die of starvation. As soon as they learned to put a minute amount of cobalt, ounces, we will recommend on some soils as little as 6 ounces of cobalt sulfate to the acre. And it's a good thing because it costs about $16,000 a ton. So it's expensive stuff. But on the other hand, if you need that, it's going to slow down in terms of, it's not going to kill us. We're going to go to the doctor and find out something. But in terms of just putting that minute amount of cobalt in those soils, and all of a sudden the digestion improves. I'm going to tell you this. Being a homesteading group and so forth, or gardeners, and when I first started to learn about the importance of eating good, clean foods, I was put in contact with Ernest Hallbleb at Hallbleb Orchards in McNabb, Illinois. They grew everything organic back in the 1960s and sold it through the mail. You could order cheese through the mail or whatever, as far as that goes. But Mr. Hallbleb did an experiment, because he grew open pollinated corn. And he said, these hybrid corns, why do they respond the way they do? Because they're bred to stand certain deficiencies in the soil. So he took several different types of hybrid corn, planted them on his farm, planted his open pollinated corn, and sent them to, at that time, the Armour Institute, and had them analyzed. And he said, the open pollinated corn came back. It had the various nutrients. He said the hybrid corn came back. Every hybrid, he said, had all the same nutrients as the open pollinated, except no cobalt. No cobalt. He said every one of the hybrids did not. Now, I'm not saying there's no hybrid today that doesn't have cobalt. Maybe they do. But he said there was no cobalt in any one of those hybrids, which you fed that corn to your livestock or whatever, you're not feeding them what they need in order to have the proper digestion. That's not, most of the time when we check cobalt in soil, they're not deficient. But one thing you can tell, and that is by working with people that grow sheep, there's a problem when cobalt gets so low in sheep, they'll get a problem with facial eczema. If your cobalt gets below 0.35 parts per million, a sheep's going to get facial eczema on the test we use. If you put enough cobalt on there to get it above 0.35, guess what? It just clears up. A lot of the diseases we have and so forth are caused, for plants and for us, are caused because we're not getting enough of something. The closer we get our nutrient levels to right, and who knows what's right? What I'll tell you is, all of the clients we work with, when we finally get everything we know how to measure to the correct parts, sometimes we'll find we want to use something broad spectrum like kelp or clay dust or rock dust or things of this nature, and you put that on, all of a sudden it goes even better because there's so many of the other elements in that soil. How much of every element on the periodic table do we need to have the right amount? I don't know. We only measure about 20. But how many of those others can make a difference if they're missing? That's why once we do everything we know to do to get that, quote, soil balanced, then you buy something that has a real broad spectrum, a small amount of 70 or 80 different nutrients in it. And that's what can make a difference in supplying those things we don't know how to measure. It isn't the matter, I think, we're able to do things perfectly. It's just a matter we're able to measure the things that make the most difference in terms of being able to come in and say, well, these things are the parts that we can measure because you need quite a lot of them. If you're growing sweet corn or tomatoes in your garden and you have a cutworm problem, you're short on calcium. I don't care what your pH is. And there'll be people, oh, no, you don't need to put any lime on there. If you have cutworms, you're short on calcium. It may only be short on calcium in the top 2 inches, because that's where the cutworm is. But we have clients who correct their calcium, and there's going to be spots in a garden or a field where the calcium's extra low, and when you correct it and the rest, there's still a place that's deficient. And guess what? That's where the cutworms will start every time. You just watch where the cutworms start, go and take a soil sample there, and what you'll find is that's where you have the least amount of available calcium in that garden. Is that pounds we're talking about? No. It's percentage. It's not pH, it's percentage. When you get that percentage up above 60%, you start to discourage the cutworm. But if you come in there and put something on that then actually ties up the calcium, that cutworm, even though you say, well, we got good calcium in this soil, is it good in the top 1 to 2 inches? And there are times when you put on some pelletized lime and you can take care of that. As a matter of fact, Dr. William Albrecht, the fellow that taught us, said, whether you've got pastures or gardens or anything else, it's a good idea to put 300 pounds of calcium limestone every year once you get it corrected. Not if you've got an excess, but once you get it, if you're deficient and you get it corrected, he said, it takes about 300 pounds of calcium carbonate lime a year just to maintain that calcium level. If you have a garden and your calcium levels measure out to be reasonable and you start to see a cutworm, consider you might want to put 300 pounds, the equivalent of 300 pounds per acre. I think I can't keep this in my head. I speak a lot, but if you put on 200 pounds per acre and you've got a garden, that's 7.5 ounces per 100 square feet. Now that might sound like, well, how can I do that? Well, you get it and mix it in with sand or some kind of a way so that you can put it in there so you can spread it. Personally, what I do is you can get a little portable cement mixer and you can put all your trace elements, and when you need these very small amounts, put them all in there and use that portable cement mixer and mix it up. Go out there and spread it on the garden. Are you going to get it exact? I just do it like that. But and we'll get a little more someplace and a little less. But the thing about it is, if you put materials on a soil, the microbes do work on that as well. When you grow potatoes, if it's short in copper, if the potato is short in copper, you boil a potato and you peel that, just boil it with the peeling on it, and when you take that peeling off, if you see gray spots in that potato, you've got a copper deficiency in that soil. Now, there are people that you can read who are experts on potatoes, and they'll say, oh, that's a calcium deficiency. Because when they corrected calcium, they solved the problem. That's only if you got enough copper there, because it takes the calcium to get the copper in. Most of the soils in Ohio have good calcium levels, good enough so that that's not the limiting factor. If you have less than 2 parts per million copper, that's when you'll start to see that gray in the potato. Why does that make any difference? Copper is necessary to fight rust and fungus diseases in your garden. But copper is also necessary to take care of muscle and bone inflammation in us. And you know what? Most soils in the world are deficient in copper. Almost all of them. General exceptions are people who use turkey manure or turkey compost because they supplement copper sulfate into the manure. And if you put on 4 tons of that, generally that's enough that'll take care. Anybody that's used 4 tons of turkey manure will generally have good copper levels. Sometimes, most of the time, if you find good copper, it's going to be in river bottoms where the river has come along because of enough copper being put into the water from waste facilities and whatever. I'm not saying that's good, but that's generally where you find it. But most soils are deficient in copper. But once you correct that copper, I've got clients that we started with in the 1970s that corrected their copper, and they've never had to put it on again. Because copper is so slow at breaking down. I don't know how long it's going to be. But, you know, from 1978 until now, and you put on what copper you need and it still maintains, it's not a mistake. Because once that copper starts to drop, it starts dropping quickly. But when we start looking at applying various nutrients, how much copper does it take? You can put on 5 pounds of copper sulfate on a copper-deficient soil and put that on at planting time on potatoes, come in and measure the leaf of those potatoes at bloom, and that copper is already in those potatoes. You can have part that you don't do it and part where you do. The part that got the copper, that's already in. Now, what's the mystery about that? When you put 5 pounds of copper sulfate in to spread, that means when you spread it, you got a little blue stone over here, a little blue stone over here, a little blue stone over here. It's not even going to be close to those potatoes many times. But you can take leaf samples from any of those potatoes, and they've already got that copper. How does that happen? You have to have the life in the soil to move that around. And you know what? Our bodies do the same thing. When you get copper into your body, you don't have to put the copper right where you have the inflammation. All you have to do is get the right form of copper into your body to fight inflammation. And it just so happens, that's why a lot of people will wear an old piece of copper or whatever. It just so happens that pure copper combined with human perspiration is exactly the form of copper you need to fight inflammation of muscle and bone. Pure copper combined with human perspiration. If you wonder about whether you got pure copper or not, here's the thing. I'll just caution you because sometimes you can give people the wrong idea. Don't go out here and get a piece of a copper wire that you use for electrical and say, well, I'm going to beat that into a bracelet or something, because it has lead in it to make it malleable. You want pure 100% copper when you're taking that copper to fight to fight inflammation in your body. But if we have less than 2 parts per million copper, our plants are not getting the minimal amount of copper. If you're going wheat, 2 parts per million is enough. Many other crops, 2 parts per million is enough to fight rust and fungus disease. But if you're going raspberries or blackberries, your copper level has to get to 12 to 15 parts per million before it stops rust in blackberries and raspberries. It takes more copper. The more what I'm trying to say, when you ship it, the easier, the more perishable, that's the word I'm trying to think of. The more perishable, the more copper it takes. Well, we're not getting very far here. I've talked about the potatoes in terms of the copper. Copper levels in tomatoes, if you're less than 2 parts per million copper and you're growing tomatoes in your garden, it's going to get splits right up there around the stem. When they start turning red, if you've got splits right up there top around the stem, if you're growing grape and it splits at the stem, you have less than 2 parts per million copper. Now, there could be some other problems that will get blamed for that, but until you correct the copper, you don't collect those splits. Because copper is necessary for stalk strength and skin strength and resilience, to be able to stretch and not break, or to be able to bend and not break. Sulfur for root and trunk growth, we talked about that yesterday. We need 50 parts per million of sulfur in our garden if we want to get good root growth. That's what will maximize, get 30% more roots from it. Fertilizing trees to withstand drought, potassium and zinc are the same keys for those trees that it is for what you're growing in your garden. At least 2% potassium and at least 6 parts per million zinc on the test we're using. Vines and trees need potassium for water uptake and to build strong wood. If you want stronger wood in terms of any type of a woody plant, get your potassium up between 7 and 7.5%. That's the first thing we talk about to people that are growing grapes, whether it's raisin grapes, table grapes, wine grapes. Get that potassium up between 7 and 7.5. Not only do they have the strongest wood, but that's when they'll have the highest quality in terms of the juice or the wines or whatever that's made. Proper fertility, not too little or too much, optimizes soil life, yields, quality, and profits. And I appreciate your attention as far as that goes. I'll just say that we do soil tests for many, many gardens, and a lot of people would say, well, you know, what you present, that's for big farm. Well, we do, what we find is, if you got one flower pot, the same principles work as it does if you got a huge operation. And if you're growing fruit trees or landscape trees or flowers or bananas or blueberries or alfalfa, it really takes the same nutrients to grow them all. Why do people say, oh, you don't need as much for this or as much for that? Because some plant, it's a good thing. Some plants will stand a whole lot less of one thing, and some plants will stand a whole lot less of something else and still grow. Does that mean they're the best? No, it means they're growing, and we at least got something there. If we had to have perfect soil, a lot of us wouldn't have much food. Because when we look at soils, almost all soils are lacking in terms of just what we know how to measure. Something. I don't look for faults. I like to look for soils that say, you've done everything you need to do, and that's fine. I don't think Joel will mind me telling this, but Joel said a neighbor of his came to him and said, well, you know, we need to do some soils. And Joel told him about our soil testing service. And the neighbor came to him later and said, could I send 4 of your soils and act like they're mine? So Joel gave him 4, let him send 4 soils, and when those came back, Joel said he brought them over to me and said, these 4 soils say you don't need anything. That was Joel's soil. All his soils were on worn-out soils. Well, when you start looking at a soil test, if you do a good job of sampling, the soil tests don't lie. The real key that we are worried about most is make sure you pull the sample properly, and anyone that contacts our office, you can get online. You can get online, www.kinseyag.com, and we've got the instructions there. I see I'm already past. I got to quit. Thanks very much, and I appreciate it.
All right. I'm mic'd up. And we've got a treat for you. And we need audience participation. So we're going to do a sing-along. And we have a lot of people of faith in the crowd. I asked for a vocalist, remember? I have a choir. So you have to be kind to these people because they stood up in faith. This whole show was produced by Mr. Ken McCaw backstage. So we also have the Highland Dancers from Dayton, St. Andrews. Anybody know them? I understand they're live streamed, so there are people out there watching them. So I'm going to read a list of names here and then make them feel welcome. And then you guys, I mean, even I'm going to sing. You look at my microphone here. That's for protection. Okay, we have Michelle and Caspian from the Highland Dancers. We have Holly, Ash, Aaron, Anna, Christine, Mike, and Josiah. This is what you can do in a very short period of time if you have people that just, you know, have a smidgen of faith. Okay, are we ready? All right. See if this works.
If God wanted us to be vegetarians, he wouldn't have made cows out of meat.
We bought a farm 3 years ago to change our lives around. We got ourselves a tractor so we could plow the ground. We got some pigs and chickens and none of them were tame. But then the trouble started when Mama gave them each a name. She named the bull Sylvester cause he thinks he's big and mean. The hogs are Rick and Jenny and they're never squeaky clean. The hens are Frank and Sally and they're scared of a mouse. The sheep are Gabe and Casey and they live inside the house. We can't make no money on the farm. We can't make no money on the farm. With a duck named Lou, a cow named Sue, tell me what we're supposed to do. We can't make no money on the farm.
You gotta be kidding me.
The goats are Jim and Betty, and George and Kim and Sam. The geese are Jane and Freddie, Steve and Bob and Pam. She won't let me sell a single animal we've raised. I tell her we need money, but she will not be fazed. Now she's putting name tags on tomatoes and the beets. We're all gonna starve to death with nothing to eat. Never name the livestock, that's what they say. Cause if you name the livestock, you will surely pay. We can't make no money on the farm. We can't make no money on the farm. With a duck named Lou, a cow named Sue, tell me what we're supposed to do. We can't make no money on the farm. Mama don't name the livestock. Mama don't name the livestock again. Mama don't name the livestock. Mama don't name the livestock. Mama don't name the livestock again. We can't make no money on the farm. We can't make no money on the farm. With a duck named Lou, a cow named Sue, tell me what we're supposed to do. We can't make no money on the farm.
Put that pig down and get in here for supper.
I think we need an encore. I mean, if you get them up here, they need to do 2 songs. Who agrees? I didn't hear you sing. So you're going to sing on this song, or we're going to invalidate your ticket. How's that? All right. Okay, let's see. We got another one here. Seed to spoon. That's the theme. Here we go.
I went down to the grocery store to buy some peas and carrots. But when I saw the prices there, well, my mind could hardly bear it. I was told we must accept all this inflation stuff they're spewing. It seems they're trying to drive us all right to the brink of ruin. The produce looked okay, I guess. Don't know what farm it's made on, who planted it, how it grew, what chemicals they sprayed on. Well, it really got me thinking I should grow this on my own. Got a garden plot, maybe not a lot, but it's right there at my home. From seed to spoon, gonna grow my food myself. I'd rather pick it from the ground than pick it from a grocery shelf. I'm gonna work the soil, My toil will pay off soon. I'll eat what I've grown from what I've sown, seed to spoon. Well, the corn is looking great. We've got zucchini and potatoes. I can't wait to taste a burger topped with our tomatoes. Most everything we need can be grown in our backyards. It might take a little elbow grease, but it's really not that hard. From seed to spoon, I'm gonna grow my food myself. I'd rather pick it from the ground than pick it from a grocery shelf. I'm gonna work the soil. My toil will pay off soon. I'll eat what I've grown from what I've sown, seed to spoon.
Okay, let's hear it for the Highland Dancers and our very own Vocal Ensemble Food Independence Summit. Thank you. That was all done after I announced it here, so some very talented people. Give them a moment. Well, appropriately, right after all of that, we're going to bring the seed man himself, Mr. Marcus Wengerd, and he's going to talk about the seeds of generosity.
Good morning, everyone. I'll start my timer here so that I keep track of where things are going. Well, welcome. The topic that I'd like to speak with you about is one that I don't know how good I do at it, but I guess I can talk with you and I can remind myself regarding generosity. As you look into becoming more self-sufficient, I think we can be careful that we don't have too much self-focus, where we're just thinking about ourselves all the time, and we pull away from systems and people that we don't trust, and we become self-focused instead of generous. So there are two mindsets. The first mindset is a mindset of poverty. The mindset of poverty tends to have a finite viewpoint of the world, where there are finite resources in the world, and if someone has too much, another person has too little. The other mindset is a mindset of abundance. The mindset of abundance is a more infinite mindset where, but it requires us to engage in being productive so that everyone can have plenty, instead of some having a lot and others having a little. In order to be generous, we have to have stuff. You can't be generous if you don't have something to be generous with. And I think the team ahead of us displayed that well, because if they would have been stingy with their talents, they wouldn't have come up here. So we all have something, but in order to have something, we need to work and apply our hands to create something so that we can be generous. A definition of wealth that I really like is to produce more than you consume. I think we should be mindful of how we spend our lives so that we produce more than we consume. That's the definition of wealth. The world system teaches us that having a lot of money, having a lot of stuff is the definition of wealth. I think producing more than you consume is the definition of wealth, and I think it's that definition that allows us to be generous. I think one of the troubles of our a money system is that it allows people to engage in a lot of useless activity and still become wealthy. Think about that for a little bit. So what is generosity? Recently, I had an experience that I'll share with you. We've been going down to my wife's sister's place in South Carolina for probably 20 years. We go there nearly every year. And there's my wife's sister's, well, my brother-in-law's parents, for the last 20 years, they've invited us over for dinner. It seems every time we go down, we go to their place for dinner. And this, a month ago, was no exception. We went there, and they invited us down Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening for dinner. And as I was sitting at the dinner table, I thought, why do they invite us down for dinner? There was 9 of us, and then some of their family was there, big, long, 24-foot table. And I thought, you know, Don and Ruth Hirschberger are their names. And they don't really have a reason to invite us. Yeah, we're friends, but they always prepare a really good meal, and they invite us. We have a good evening. But I know how many excuses can get into the way of having dinner, having somebody over for dinner. You know, everything has to be just right, or you know, you don't have the right something to make for them, or you're not sure if they'll like it. You have all those excuses, and here Don and Ruth would invite us over and never, you know, they weren't doing it to impress me or us, or they weren't doing us because they expected anything in return. They were doing it because I believe they are generous people. And Don and Ruthie doing that for us for 20 solid years was really meaningful to me. I think every one of us is generous. And before I studied to share this with you, I would have said not everyone is generous. Some people are stingy. Maybe I'm stingy sometimes. So I judged others. I judged myself when I felt like I was less than generous. But as I considered it, I decided, you know what? I think all of us are generous. Some of us are generous in ways that others don't notice. Others are generous in ways that we don't notice. But if we take a minute, we can find where someone else is generous. They just might not be generous in the same way that we are. So as I considered generosity, as I considered what Don and Ruth Hirschberger did for us, Don has a huge garden, and I think that's one of the things that makes him able to be generous. He has a garden, and he takes care of a garden just to be able to share from the garden. What is currency? Because usually when we think of generosity, we think of being generous with money. Sure, we think of being generous with time, with talents, but generally we think if someone is stingy with their money, they have to be stingy. They can't be generous because they're stingy with their money. So what is money? What is currency? Less than 250 years ago, the indigenous communities in Central America used money as a medium of exchange. Or they used seed as a medium of exchange. Why did they use seed as a medium of exchange? I believe seed defines or fits the definition of currency the best because it multiplies. Seed enables us to be generous. I think that's why God created the earth that way. He created the seeds so that we could care for the seeds, we could care for the garden, we could produce more than we consume, and we could share it with others. We're much less likely to stockpile seeds. Money we can stockpile, we can save, we can hoard. But when we hoard seeds don't really do much for us. We have to use them in order for them to be valuable. So it encourages us to give them away rather than hoard them for ourselves. When we look at a currency like gold is valuable because it's scarce. So gold can generate a scarcity mindset in our minds rather than an abundance mindset. Now, when I say these things, I'm not opposing our current money system. I think our current money system is amazing. You know, when they decide to, they can print more, which I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. I don't understand our money system good enough to make judgments about it, but it seems to me that, you know, they could be a little better at doing some of those things. But a money system, we use it today, we enjoy the benefits of it. I just like to stretch your minds to think about the world, the Earth's money system, rather than the current system that we live in, because I think God's money system is more real than the money system that we use today. So, in order for something to have value, we have to make it scarce. That's the gold standard. God's standard is things become valuable when we use them and when we share them. The gold standard says it's valuable because there's not much. God's system says it's valuable because you get to use it and share it. So I'd like to give you a challenge. If you had a bucket of seeds, a bucket of wheat seeds, and you knew only two farmers. One farmer had a beautiful farm, and it was productive, fields were well taken care of. The other farmer's farm was run down, and you know, he barely got his crops out on time, he barely got them in on time. And you have a bucket full of seeds. You can give it to farmer one or farmer two. Which farmer will you give it to? I would give my seeds to the farmer who takes care of his fields. And that's a little strange, because normally we would think, well, I don't want to give resources to a person that already has plenty of resources. Why would I do that? Well, the person has plenty of resources because he knows how to use the resources he has. So my challenge to you is, when you take a look at your time, your talent, your resources, invest in people who know how to take a little and make a lot. And then remember to be generous and share those resources with others. The whole experience with Don Hirschberger inspired me to do something in the Berlin Seeds catalog. So I'm not sure how this will pan out yet, but I'd like to do something in the Berlin Seeds catalog for unreasonable hospitality. So if you have two friends, or if you have three friends that vote for you and write Berlin Seeds and say, you have unreasonable hospitality, you'll get your seeds for free. Or you'll get your seeds for 50% off. I'm not quite sure how we'll do it yet, but it'll either be free or 50% off, because I'd like to support unreasonable hospitality in myself and in others. So you can watch the Berlin Seeds catalog to see what becomes of that. So lay aside your selfishness, lay aside your jealousy, work with your hands so you have to give, and let others do what others will. And I believe your life will be rich. Thank you very much.
That last step almost got me. All right. The clicker. Next up, we have Sarah Thrush, also known as Sarah at Peelies and Petals. She also has an email that says the Crazy Canning Lady. So I get emails from the Crazy Canning Lady. She has 1,300,000 followers on TikTok and more followers on Facebook and Instagram and a YouTube channel. So it's a real privilege to have her here. She's working very closely with my company on canning lids because she endorses them and says what I can't say believably, and that is that they're better than the other brand that starts with a B. Let's just say that. Okay. We stood in the gap, so we would appreciate your support, because I need to make millions more to recover my investment, but that's not important. My accountant says it's important. So, Just a couple things about Sarah. Oh, I want to mention, right now we're in every Menards store, and Sarah's on a tour going on a kind of like an Easter egg hunt to try to find our lids in Menards. And she's also the host of Destination Preservation. If you want to get a little bit more information on that, see her at her booth. But here's what you probably don't know. She's also a butcher. I had to do that. So before she did this, she was a surgical assistant in a trauma center in Chicago for many years. So that's a talent that... I asked her if she would cut up people. She told me, and she'll get the mic here in a minute, but she said she actually never cut. She just handed the tools to, and some other things she'll probably tell you about. Okay, please welcome Sarah Thrush.
Thank you. Hello, good morning. How are you guys doing? Great. I was not a butcher. I was a fixer. Oh. Garden to Jar. We're live. I have stories about John later. I'll be out there. So we're going to talk Garden to Jar today. All right, so why'd you come here this morning? Think about your why. Every time I do these events, every time I talk to people, that's the very first thing I want to know. What is your why? I want to say to every single person in here and everybody watching online, you're here because you're curious, correct? You're curious. And I want to commend you on that because you've decided that you want to educate yourself. And that's commendable. You've decided that you maybe want to step away from what mainstream does and maybe live a different type of lifestyle, and that's commendable. I also want to say there's a lot of reasons why we come to these summits. Some of us come here because we want to reclaim our food. I think that's a theme we can all agree on. We want our food security. We want our food independence. But some other things that go along with that is learning these sustainable practices that some of us don't know anything about, and that's okay. That's why you're here. You're here to learn. So all your workbooks that you have, take all the notes. When you're meeting new people and you're listening to different speakers, jot down all their information. Reach out to them. Reach out to their teams. Follow them on their websites and their social medias. This is how we learn, and this is how we grow. This is how we connect with people, not just the experts, but also the peers that are sitting around you. And we're going to go into community building in a little bit. But we need to build our communities up, and these are a great event to do that at. I'm also going to ask you to take some action today. You took a very big first step coming here. How many people in this room, you have been to this summit before? Look at those hands. What was your reason for coming back? What was your why? You want to learn more things, right? New speakers, new experts, new classes that you can take. So I want you to take action on those things today. Two of the things we're going to talk about in depth for about 15 minutes is food security and food sovereignty. Now, we talk about food security a lot, but one of the things that we don't touch on as much is food sovereignty. So security is your right to have sufficient, safe, and nutritious foods. How many people in this room shop at a grocery store? I think we all do, to some extent, right? Unless you are 100% self-sufficient. And we rely on these companies that are providing our food to provide us with safe and nutritious foods. How many are feeling lately that maybe that trust has been a little bit broken? Shattered. I heard shattered. These food systems that we've come to rely on, a lot of us, through recent generations, has become broken. And so we're really looking to take back that food trust. We want to trust what we're eating. We want to trust that plate of food that we're setting down in front of our children every night. And that leads us to sovereignty. And sovereignty is your right to healthy food that is culturally appropriate for you. Sovereignty and food security go hand in hand. You can gain food security, but you can't keep it if you don't have sovereignty over your food. That means access to clean drinking water, growing water, clean soils. That means access to, if you are on a cultural diet that does not allow a certain type of food, or you have to eat kosher, having access to those foods, or having access to the right to grow those foods. Those two things have to go hand in hand. So when we talk about food security, 54 million Americans are hungry. That number is up from last year. I did this slide again last year. 54 million, we're up from last year. We're not getting better, we're getting worse. Things are not getting better, they're going down. More and more Americans are hungry all the time. And we have 25 million Americans, that's almost 47% of that 54 million that are in the SNAP gap. Have you ever heard of the SNAP gap? SNAP is a food assistance program, helps you get seeds, helps you get food. It's for people that are poverty-stricken, people that fall below a certain income level. They can get those benefits. But almost half of them don't qualify. That gap means that they make too much money for assistance, but not enough money to survive. That's a huge number. So what we do at these food summits is we want to help close that number. We want to help bring communities together so we can help feed our fellow man. Sovereignty is also at a threat. And I have two things here. Corporate control, and I could list a lot of these, but I just picked one. 4 companies globally, 4, own 60% of our seeds. Let that sink in for a second. 4 companies, 60% globally of our seeds. And the next one there, we've lost our biodiversity because of this. 75% of the world's food comes from 12 plants and 5 animals. That means most Americans are eating 12 different types of plants and 5 different types of animals. We've lost biodiversity because we've lost access to heirloom seeds. We've lost access to diversity of what we can buy in a grocery store and what we can actually get our hands on to grow. Again, these two things go hand in hand, and I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but food security. I used to travel with a drum corps, and my responsibility on the drum corps was I was the food mom. Go figure, right? So I was responsible with a team of other adults for feeding 200 young adults 4 meals a day. And because they're athletes, they had to be 5,000 calorie meals every day. It's a lot of food. And what I learned about food during that time is what you put in your body matters. Because you can feed somebody 5,000 calories of empty food and their body's not run properly. I also used to feed a ton of high school kids in different programs, marching band, the performing arts, and I would come set up tables of food. And I had one kid come through the line one time, real tall kid. And he looked healthy. He looked wonderful. He was energetic. And he came through the line and he said, "Mama Sarah, thank you for the food." They all say thank you. And I said, "You're welcome." And he said, "No, I don't think you understand." He said, "I don't have enough food for this weekend. My parents don't have money for dinner. We couldn't get to the grocery store. And this is going to be my last meal before I can get back to school on Monday." I packed up as much food as I could, loaded that kid up with food and sent him home. But this is something that millions of Americans, children and elderly, people possibly sitting next to you, are going through every single day. And you just don't know. You can't look at somebody and know what their struggle is. By the way, I still keep in contact with that kid. He's doing wonderful. He's married, he has a child, and he is food secure. All right, so not to be doom and gloom, let's take a look at what we can do. We're going to look at these three things: growing, preserving, and engaging. And when I talk growing, I'm not talking just about seeds and growing food. We got to do better than that. We got to do bigger than that. Every single one of us in this room, you have an idea of what you want your life to look like. But we have to take that back to our communities. We have to start getting this back on the ground level. We have to start doing this locally. So it's not just about growing your food, but it's about growing those relationships and growing in your community. I am one person. Everybody on this stage is one person, and you come to hear us speak. You come to our classes to learn something, but I can't reach everybody in your community. That's on you. That's on you. You need to take that back to your community. Since John brought up how I'm a butcher, we have a saying in surgery. It's called see one, do one, teach one. Does that make you feel comfortable laying on the operating room table? And what that means is you see one, you watch one surgery, you see how it's done, you take notes, you learn how to do it. The next thing you do is you do it. You actually participate in it, and you do it. And then that third one is you turn around and you teach that to somebody else. And we need in this community a see one, do one, teach one attitude. That brings us to preserving our food, preserving our way of life, preserving our heritage, and then finally engaging each other. We say this a lot: grow your food, grow your future. This garden to jar path has to start small. It starts small. One person, one homestead, one farmer's market, one educational class in your kitchen with 3 or 4 people that you know that want to learn how to do something. It starts small. If you don't start small, what's going to happen is you're going to get completely overwhelmed. Who in here decided they're going to learn all the things and do all the things? Where's my type A's? It can get overwhelming. And if you try to do all the things all at once, how many things are you going to succeed at? Not many. And if you do succeed at them, you're going to completely burn yourself out, right? So we need to start small. Joining a community, again, we're going to get to a community building here in just a second, and then educating yourself, which you guys have chosen to come here today and do. So bravo. Preserving with a purpose. We're talking about preserving our food and preserving our way of life. When you are learning a new skill on how to preserve your food, you need to learn how to do more than one thing. So maybe it's this year you learn how to can. Maybe next year you're learning how to ferment. Maybe you're going to save up and buy a freeze dryer. All of those things. We want to learn all of the things so we have a lot of knowledgeable tools in our tool shed. And preserving our way of life. Honoring your cultural heritage and your food. Our food is our story. I have a friend who is a biologist, and he shared an interesting kind of perspective on something that I'm going to share with you here today. And it's his story, not mine. Don't get mad. So he did a study on different species of animals, including humans. And what he found was, in general, women live longer than men. The female species lives longer than the male species. We all know why, but we're not going to talk about it. You guys be doing some crazy stuff. OSHA is there for a reason. But what he found is, in the human species, it's even a longer lifespan than in other species. And he started to ask the question, why? Why is it this way? Who in here is a grandmother or grandfather? I can tell you why. It's our responsibility to pass down every single thing we know to those kids, to your children and your grandchildren. But grandparents hold a very special demographic because they have the knowledge that the parents don't quite have yet. And that is going to help preserve your way of life and your family's way of life. So grandparents, I am tasking you today to pick up those grandkids and get them in the kitchen and get them in the gardens I have a grandbaby. She's 1. She lives very far from me. We all have to do better. That's all there is to it. It's not that we're doing anything wrong. We just need to do better, because we need to make sure that these future generations are going to have the knowledge and the skills to keep going, preserving our way of life. So powerful preservation. It's powerful. When you take that food and you do something with it to transform it and get it on your shelves and get your family that food security, it's powerful and it's empowering. Canning, fermenting, dehydrating, freeze-drying, smoking, salting. There are so many things that we can do. Somebody the other day sent me a video. A woman was waxing eggs. I was like, oh, is that a thing? You know, right? Like, and then I go into a deep hole. I'm like, I need to learn all the things about waxing an egg. And I think we all do that. But there's so many different ways of preserving. Specifically to canning, because I'm teaching in the canning tent today, all day long. Come stop by, come learn a few things. But specifically to canning, we actually get in some of our foods an increased nutritional value when our foods are canned. Not decreased, but increased. Canned tomatoes and canned corn are a prime example of that. The University of Illinois, they did a study where they found that you get 3.5 times more antioxidants from canned tomatoes than a fresh tomato. That's wild, right? So applying heat to corn and tomatoes actually increases their nutritional value. The University of Maine did a study that said there's 17 essential nutrients in canned foods that people get more of than eating them fresh or frozen. So there are certain applications where canned food is really a great nutritional way to eat. 90%, this is the USDA, take it with a grain of salt. Canned fruits and vegetables retain up to 90% of their nutritional value. So for people that live in food deserts and people that don't have access, maybe you live in a city and you don't have access to a community garden or a plot of land where you can grow your own things, canned food is a great alternative for getting your nutritional value every day. And here's another one, bioavailability. So the way our body processes the fiber, when you eat produce, it is more available to your body when it's been canned. So it becomes more useful to your body, and that was the University of California. So there are also nutritional benefits to different types of preservation. So the last part of this here is the engagement. The engagement. So this is the community building. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, there are 3 things here when we're building a community. One is mind, body, and whether you like it or not, spirit. Whether you're a religious person, non-religious, it doesn't matter. There is a spiritual connection in community. The mind is having the knowledge, and to do this, to help strengthen our minds in our communities, we need to share our skills. Who in here does any type of bartering? Is that still alive and well? Yes, yes, and I think in the Homestead community more than anywhere else in the world, really. I barter for honey. I barter for potatoes. I barter for garlic. Actually, now that I think about it, I probably barter more than I actually do. But anyways, bartering in your community helps strengthen the mind of the community. Remember when I talked earlier about starting small, not doing all the things? Where are the people that don't like or don't know how to bake bread? I'm going to raise my hand because I do not enjoy baking bread. It is not my thing. All right, now raise your hand if you are the baker. You love it, you know how to do it. Okay, everybody that doesn't like baking bread, look around. Who just had their hand up? Where are my bread bakers? All right, non-bread bakers, look around. Take note. I want you to go to that person right after this and say, hey, do you live around here? Because we don't need to do it all. We don't need to do it all. What we need to do is build a community that can help us do it all. I don't want to bake bread. I'm not good at it, okay? But I can can something. Oh, you just took a deer and you don't have a pressure canner? Bring that meat over here. I got a canner or a freeze dryer. I'll run 3 trays for you, 1 for me. Right? We barter, we trade skills, we trade commodities, and this is the way to bring this back down to our community levels. Who, every time you leave the grocery store, are a little more sticker shocked every time? My goodness, what is happening, right? We need to start spending our time and our money intentionally, and that happens between us. Community body, health of one is health of all. We're only as strong as our weakest link. And then community spirit. We need to collectively get back into a co-creative space with not only nature but with each other. Co-creative space, nature, and each other. All right, so I think my time is like near up. So last slide. Commit to one thing today. And I'm going to share a story, and I see this beautiful couple sitting in front of me, and I'm not going to point them out. But I'm going to share their story, with their permission, of course. Last night we were talking, and it just reminded me so much of me and my husband. And he's kind of the more go-getter. He wants to learn all the things and do all the things, and you know, he's got a list of things that he wants to learn and learn how to do. And she's more of the, we are doing the things. Right? We did this. Well, last year they left here. They wanted a goal of raising their own meat birds. And this year when I spoke to them, he said, I want to learn more things. And she said, you know what? We're raising the meat birds this year. And that's what we need to do. We need to support each other. There's always one person that is the kite and one person that's the kite string. If you're not married to each other, find yourself a friend. And start doing one thing today. That's it, one thing. Grow one garden bed. Grow one tomato plant on a balcony. Engage one person and say, hey, I see you're a bread baker. Can I have your number? That's all you need to do. Do one thing and preserve one thing and engage one person. And I think if we do that collectively, we can start growing. We can start growing and we can start taking back control of our food security and our food sovereignty. I want to thank you guys. Don't clap yet. Don't do it. I want to thank you guys for having me back here. I come back here every year, and I always say coming back here feels like coming home. This is a very different environment than a lot of homesteading events that I do. And the difference here is the community. Everybody that keeps coming back year after year, because there's more to learn and more to share with each other. So I want to thank you for having me back again this year. I want to urge you to come to the canning tent. We're going to be canning all day. I want to urge you to take notes, make connections, and please, if any of this resonates with you, stop by our destination preservation booth. We're creating an entire documentary around these foundational principles, and we need help. We need you guys. We need like minds to help us get this off the ground. Also, the book is available. I said that yesterday. It's still available again today. Thank you so much for having me, and enjoy your food summit.
Why do I have two?
In case one. All right, thank you, Sarah. Okay, we've got Joel Salatin coming up. I've got a couple of announcements to make. She was talking about making notes. I still have that notebook backstage where somebody diligently took notes yesterday and misplaced it like I often do. So if this is your notebook, we have it backstage. You can come back and get it. How many of you have your summit guide with you? Look at that. Marcus, we're going to have to print one again next year. Okay, very good. So would you please go to the back cover and then open it up I want you to look at these nifty things called QR codes. So, but before I do that, I have a survey. How many of you learned something since you've come here? That's almost 100%. Okay. So I want you to go to the back. On the bottom, we have a QR code to a survey. I mean, last year we fielded some questions from the crowd. I might still do that when I sum it up. But it's much better for us if you go there and you take time to fill out the survey and give us feedback, because we have that and can look at it and make our plans for next year based on your feedback. So if you please do that today sometime or on your way home, we would really appreciate having that information from you. On the top, you know, we are enabling you to plan ahead. So at noon today, the tickets for next year are going to be available, I think 20% off for 7 days. So you can scan that and book for next year while you're thinking about it. It's not going to get any cheaper than that. And we want you all to come back next year and bring a friend. Okay. All right. The man that needs no introduction in homesteading communities and in the Plain community, because he's one of the contributing writers to Plain Values, Mr. Joel Salatin is going to come up and help us figure out what it takes to move you forward.
Thank you, John. Thanks for coming back. This is always the acid test. They came back. They're still here. Good. It's wonderful. I'm enjoying this immensely, learning a lot from you, enjoying the conversations, the fellowship, and the shared interest, because when we leave here, it gets lonely out there sometimes, doesn't it? And so we'll enjoy this mountaintop experience for a while. So as I talk to people routinely, it seems like we're having a common theme here this morning about fear, and fear is a big deal because it does move us. But faith is what makes us stop. And I run into a lot of people who are beginning, who have dreams in this space, but they're intimidated by the number of things that it takes to actually, quit the town job, come back to the homestead, the farm full time. I always, I love homesteaders. For our first 20 years at our farm, we were, essentially glorified homesteaders, lots of acreage, but just basically growing for ourselves. And on rocks and gullies, it was hard to do a whole lot else anyway. Dad and Mom worked, and we were little kids, and so we had a big garden, milked a couple cows, and kind of fed ourselves. That was about it. But then when you move from there to, if you aspire, and I always enjoy this, how many people, if you could leave your off-farm job and make a full-time living on your homestead farm with your family, we'll call it a farmstead, we'll combine the two, your farmstead with your family, how many of you would do it? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So that's what I want to talk about here this morning. What is holding you back? What do you fear? Here are seven things, so all right, you can number them through, things that frighten people from success. I have found, even in my own life, that a lot of times I fear success more than failure. Failure is easy. Anybody can fail, and you can, cry in your beer and, oh, yeah, I've been a victim and the world's against me and and all that. Failure is easy. But boy, if you succeed, oh no, what am I going to do now? We just had 2 weeks ago Oliver Anthony. You know Oliver Anthony, Richmond, north of Richmond? Well, he's made a bunch of money all of a sudden, so he bought a farm, and it turns out he's a fan. He called me, he said, would you come down and brainstorm with me how to handle my farm? I said, I got a better idea. How about you coming up and seeing what we do? And then if you still want me, I'll come down, but otherwise, come on up and do this. He said, you mean I can come? I said, yeah, I'll take you around the farm, on one proviso that you have dinner with us and sing for our farm crew. And he said, oh, I'd be glad to do that. And so he has, if you know his story, he has gone from nothing to, and now, you know, he's got a bus, he's got an agent, all this stuff, and he doesn't like it. And it's been troubling. Success sometimes, and I love him. I'm not saying anything that's inappropriate here, but just sometimes we're intimidated by what if I am successful? So here are 7 things. The first fear that I think that most of us have is knowledge. Knowledge. How do I do this? What do I do first? Where do I start? You know, after the 2 days with Neal Kinsey, how do I learn 5% of what that guy knows? Right? Yeah. That whole thing, that the fear of I don't know enough, I don't have enough knowledge, is intimidating. It's paralyzing, in fact. All right. So each of these, I'm going to give you the fear, then I'm going to give you the solution. All right. That's how we're going to go through this. All right. So solutions. Number 1. Start with what you like. If you don't like goat, if you're not a fan of Chevin goat meat, don't get goats. If you don't like parsnips, don't grow them. Because you might have to eat your way through your inventory. Do what interests you, not what someone else says you should do. And expose yourself to lots of options to find out what resonates. A lot of times, our little silos, you know, and we have our little things, and we don't allow ourselves the eclecticism to see what's out there. Start with what you like. Number 2, do the opposite of industrial anything. All right? The conventional advice is always wrong. I think I know where our local extension office is, but I don't go there. If you want advice, the Dave Ramsey proximity principle is what you're after. You get as close to somebody who's doing what you want to do, and you just snuggle right up to them, and you bird dog them. You read what they've read what they've written. English major, read what they wrote. You read their stuff. You watch their videos. You hook up with them. All right. When we started, all the advice was, Dad went to conventional people, experts. How do I make a living on this farm? All the advice was graze the woods, plant corn, build silos, borrow more money, build a Tyson chicken house. This is the conventional advice. I suggest you farm like a lunatic. Do the opposite of industrial anything. Number 3, start small. Think embryos. Around our farm, you run into most people, any business advice, when you have an idea, they'll say, well, have you thought about how big this can be? You know what? Around our farm, we always start with how small can it be? Because if it doesn't work small, it won't work big. There's nothing about big that will solve your small problems. We run into this a lot with people that they think, that our apprentice program, he's successful because he's got all this free labor. Yeah. Let me tell you about the broken hitches and the bent off, pole building things and the rolled pickup trucks and yeah, that's free help, all right. If you're not running an efficient, successful, awesome operation yourself, there's nothing about getting a partner that will help you. It'll just complicate the situation. And you don't need somebody on your heels all the time asking you, why are you doing this? Why are you planning that? Why are you doing it this way? You'll just get nuts. So start with embryos. How small can it be? Don't seek the ship. Innovate with prototypes. Don't jump off a cliff and sink the mothership. Test things before going whole hog. We do experiments all the time. Do little experiments. Experiment with 5 chickens. Experiment with 3 tomato plants. Experiment with 1 set of a canning processing deal, okay? Number 4, start something. Start something, anything. Don't worry about if it's right. Don't worry about if it's wrong. Don't worry about if it's good, bad, indifferent. Fill your space. Start with something. Movement creates movement. Inertia works both ways. If you're not doing anything, you tend to want to, a body at rest tends to want to stay at rest. But if you're moving, you get momentum. I mean, even if it's a quart jar of mung bean sprouts on the windowsill, start with something, anything. Bees on the rooftop if you're in the city. A little 12-inch by 12-inch vermicomposting bin under the kitchen sink. Okay, you can do that. If you don't have any land, pot gardens. Gardens in pots. Well, pot garden, that's okay too. Those of you who know my libertarianism know that it's all good. All right. But start something. Don't worry about if it's exactly right or not. If you read business analysis, they will constantly tell you if you get anywhere close to 80%, go ahead and do it. You don't need to be 100% sure. Number 5, good enough is perfect. Good enough is perfect. Always think function over form. I know we all read the pretty little, modern homesteading and the pretty pictures in plain values or whatever, right? And we all, I look at those barns people have, those buildings and chicken coops and stuff, and I just drool over them, but I know how expensive they are, how difficult they are to build, so I just use my little, 87-degree angles, and it's kind of functional, and the gates are parallelograms and all that, but it works. If you come to one of the most common things when people come to our farm is wow, it's not real pretty. My mentor, Alan Nation, used to always say, he said, a profitable farm has a threadbare look. Look at my animals. Look at my earthworms. Look at my soil. Look at my grass, okay? I'm not there to show off buildings and white fences and mowed this and mowed that. Okay? Good enough is perfect. Function over form. You can always fix it later. We're right now this summer, we're in a major rebuild of a big hay shed feeding awning that we did 25 years ago before we had a sawmill and before we had as much talent as we do now, talent beyond me. And so we built this huge awning. It's 32 feet by 150 feet. And man, over the years, we have generated mountains and mountains and mountains of compost under that thing with our, carbonaceous diaper. But the rafters, again, we didn't have a sawmill, so I just went in the woods and I kind of selected as straight of trees as I could find, and those are the rafters. So the roof kind of has some, few waves in it, and we can never actually get it to be watertight. There was always some drips, because it was just not exactly flat. But it lasted 25 years. Now we have a sawmill. We have better craftsmanship on our team, and so we're tearing it down and rebuilding it. What if I had said, we're not going to build this until we can build it right with, dress lumber and all square and perfectly right? We would have missed 25 years and thousands of tons of compost for soil development. Okay? Good enough is perfect. Number 6, and I know, Neal Kinsey just had to slide up here. If it's worth doing right. Neal, I love you to death, but you're wrong. The truth is, if it's worth doing poorly first. Nobody does it right at first. And what happens is, we have that thing in the back of our head, some matriarch or patriarch in the family, it's worth doing right, And it intimidates us because, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I don't know if it's right, so I don't do anything. Listen, think about it. you got a family shindig coming up. You know, all the families are together. And the latest little family addition, you know, Emily Sue, right? She's 9, 10 months. And she's crawling around on the, you know, floor with her diaper. And all the adults are yak, 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 you know. And suddenly Emily Sue, she comes up and she grabs hold of the side of a chair, you know, and she kind of pulls herself up and she's kind of tottering there. And probably her mom sees her first and says, oh, look. Emily Sue, she's standing up. This is the first time she stood up. And of course, all the adults, they look at Emily Sue. Emily Sue's sitting there, you know, and she's looking up. All the adults look at her, you know, and she's terrified. You know, center of attention. She loses her grip, plops down on her diaper, right? What do all the adults do? Well, they get around Emily Sue and say, well, if you can't walk any better than that, just quit. No, what do? They say, oh, come here, let's get over here. Just put your handy up here. Let's try, you know, let's get up here. You know, we don't walk well first. We don't talk well first. We don't poop well. I guess we poop. We just don't know where to put it. We don't do anything well first. So I want you to promise yourself when you leave here and you go home and you take some of this information, you do some new things, some trial things. I want you to promise me you'll look in the bathroom mirror. Everybody's got a mirror in their bathroom, right? You look in the mirror and you tell yourself when you're intimidated about not doing it right the first time, you'll hike your diaper up. You look in the mirror and tell yourself if it's worth doing poorly first. Okay? That'll get you over that hump. Second fear. Oh boy, time. All right. Second fear, acquiring land. How can I afford to buy land? Where should I buy land? All the things about land. Here's the solution. Divorce land ownership from farming. All you need is access to land. You don't need to own land. All you need is access. The essence of a farm is not the land. It is what a farmer does to land. What's the difference between a farm and a park? A farm and an industrial site? A farm and a residential? The land is all the same. It gets rain, it gets sun, it grows grass, it, you know, whatever. It's got soil. You know, what's the difference? The difference is a farmer. Now, one of the problems is we've tried to preserve farmland with policies and different things and nonprofit organizations, and we're not preserving farmers. So, how do we do this? Number one, have a mobile farm, portable infrastructure. One of my favorite stories is a lady in Edmonton, Canada, big city, living in a 5th floor condominium, desperately wanted to farm, had no land, no money, but she just wanted to farm desperately. But she realized, I've got one friend that has a backyard. So she went to this friend with a backyard. She said, would you mind me putting something like, you know, a 10 foot by 10 foot, well, she probably used meters, but anyway, you know, a 3 meter by 3 meter garden in your backyard. Friend said, sure, that'd be fine. So she puts it in. Well, next thing, the neighbor of that lady's looking over the fence. Boy, that's a pretty garden. You think your friend would put one in my backyard? And so, well, I'll ask her. Of course, yes. I met her 18 months after starting with the first yard. She quit her job. She was farming almost 20 backyards. Her entire farm was hand tools in saddlebags on her bicycle. She bicycled from plot to plot in the city. Full-time farmer, had a part-time assistant, and the name of her business was On Borrowed Ground. Is that not a cool story? So every time I hear, oh, you know, I can't, I meet somebody like this that's worse off, has a different context, a more difficult context, and somehow they power through. My dad used to say, if at first you don't suck a seed, just suck and suck and suck until you do suck a seed. Mobile farming, mobile infrastructure allows you to do what I call nook and cranny farming. Okay? Mobile infrastructure, you can move your farm around. No building permits, no real estate taxes, no depreciation because your infrastructure isn't even a machine. You can expense it all. A modular farm, a mobile farm, a modular farm, all right? A modular farm means that your components you scale by duplication, not by centralization. Start with one and then add additional ones. You know, if you want to grow chickens for Tyson, I hope nobody here wants to grow chickens for Tyson, but if you do, the first thing you got to do is have a $500,000 building. Are you with me? Would you call that an impediment and an intimidation to entry? Absolutely. But if you just want to run chicken shelters, pastured poultry, you just cancel your Netflix subscription for 2 months, and with pocket change, you can build one of these chicken shelters, and you can be in business, and if you like it, you can retain your earnings, build a second one, and if you're as nuts as we are, you can build 210 of them. Over time, debt-free, with cash flow, Dave Ramsey would be proud. Okay? A modular farm makes it easy to enter, easy to exit. A management intensive, be management intensive. Substitute pharmaceuticals, capital intensity, and high energy for labor. That puts your equity in management and information. Equity is not in your infrastructure. Equity is in your management, information, and customer base, your patron base. Always invest in information first. And I congratulate all of you for realizing the best investment you can make is in information, and that's what makes this summit so valuable. So practical options: you can rent, you can caretake. There are people all over this country that are elderly, that have land, that would like to not go into assisted living if they could find a young person, a young couple, to come and clean their house, cook a couple meals a day for them, and they'll basically give you the keys to the kingdom. I mean, I get letters from 80-year-old people. Can you find me a young person to inherit my farm to? My kids will just sell it, and can you find me a person to give it to? If you're a young person, you've got to show yourself worthy, though, to do this. You can partner with someone. You can squat on land. You can piggyback by adding an enterprise to an existing farm. There is not, sorry to be on the kick of pastured poultry, but let me tell you, there is not a piece of land in the world under persimmon trees, apple trees, in wheat farms, any land in the world that wouldn't benefit from having pastured poultry on it. All right, third fear. Fear number 3, finances, running out of money. What happens when I don't have a paycheck? When do I leave my town job? Can we get this up and running fast enough? Cash flow, how do I get from payday to payday in farming? Solutions. Number 1, be debt-free. Be debt-free. Live cheaply. Cut your expenses by growing your own food. Dropping your utility bills. Yes, that means turning off the air conditioner. Wear junk clothes. Stay home. You're not living in the city, you're living in the country. If your kids have to be in all the little leagues and ballets, stay in the city. If you can't figure out how to substitute the joy of ballet and little league with salamanders and hunting frogs and fishing around the pond, you're not very creative. Buy used and wait for deals. Be patient. Speed is expensive. And no mortgage. I like to tell people to have a nest egg for at least 1 year. This takes the pressure off. Teresa and I did this. That's when I made my jump. September 24, 1982, big day in my life. Left that town job, came back to the farm after we had a 1-year nest egg. And I fully intended to go back off farm. I said, we're probably going to run through it in a year, but in a year, we'll get so many projects done by me being here all the time that maybe my total time away can be cut from 15 to 12 or 12 to 8, or you see. And turns out that little nest egg became like the widow's cruse of oil, and it just kept on because we had cut our expenses so much. We grew all our own food. We had our own firewood. We drove a $50 car. In fact, we took our honeymoon in that $50 car and drove it for 3 years. It threw a rod, and I sold it for parts for $75. That's the way I like to buy cars. You can't do that with a horse and buggy, let me tell you. So get your nest egg down. This lets you dive completely into your new venture, totally put yourself into it, and what's the worst case? You go back to work for a while. Fill in with piecework. Okay, fill in with piecework. There's always somebody around that needs some help building a fence, running a sawmill, planting trees. There's 1,000 ways to earn money in the country. Ken Sherabach wrote a book about that, 1,000 Ways to Earn Money in the Country, years ago. I don't know if it's in print or not, but I mean, he had everything from belly dancing to whatever. I know a guy that raised up 2 calves on a bottle, trained them to be oxen, and he did birthday parties for $1,000 a pop. He would bring his oxen and take kids on an oxen birthday party ride. You think that was unique? That's unique, all right? But just, man, you know, our weak link is not opportunity. Our weak link is imagination. Daniel says our problem is not that there's no opportunity. Our problem is constipation of imagination. Okay, and then cash flow. Grow some quick turnaround stuff. That's one of the reasons I love pastured poultry. 8 weeks, you buy them from the hatchery. 8 weeks, you got something to sell. I mean, that's as fast as a radish. Fast. Get your cash flow together. Multi-season complementarity. You know, if you're too busy in the summer, cut down some of your summer stuff and think, well, what can I do in the winter? You know, woodworking, you know, wintertime stuff that you can do in the winter. Employ yourself in an enterprises that have opposite busy times, and don't ever add another enterprise that has the same labor curve as the enterprise you're already doing. Every enterprise has a labor curve. You know, some months are heavier than other months. So as you add complementary enterprises to ease out your cash flow, almost all businesses, that collapse. They don't collapse because they have a bad service or a bad product. They collapse because of cash flow. The vultures, the bills are having to be paid out the back door faster than the money's coming in the front door. So you need to even out your cash flow situation by having complementary enterprises. Next fear number 4, labor. Who will do the work? What if you want to go away? I can't afford to hire employees. How can I get it all done? Time, those sorts of things. Solutions. Number 1, love people. Some of you got to come to the altar and find out how to love people. Most farmers don't love people. That's why they're farmers. This is not a normal farmer characteristic. Most farmers have a much better relationship with their horse or their tractor than they have with their spouse, because the horse and tractor never roll their eyes at you and question you, and they're always happy to see you. So, love people. You can't do it all yourself, so don't even try. The gifts and talents necessary to run a successful enterprise do not all grow on the same pair of legs. And if you're going to be successful, it will mean partnering up with people that have skills and passions dissimilar to you, not similar. Number 2, incentivize the team. And I'd love to go in this. I can do a whole hour on this, but I just have to go. If you want this all laid out, it's in my book, Fields of Farmers, you know, germinating young farmers. But you don't want employees. You want commission-based, performance-based partners. Carve out fiefdoms, even for your kids, okay? Don't have the kids doing unincentivized chores. If you've got some chickens and they're gathering eggs and you're 4-year-old, turn the egg enterprise over to the child, pay them a certain amount per dozen eggs. Suddenly, they're interested and they keep their balance sheet. They can buy the feed. They can track the egg production. Guess what? Now they're going to want to have clean eggs. They're going to want to have a lot of eggs and happy chickens and healthy chickens, because it's turned into a business. Performance-based remuneration. Give authority and autonomy with the ability to self-increase compensation. On our farm, every single one of our team members, we now support about 22 full-time salaries from our farm, and every single person knows that if they can think up of a complementary enterprise that they can add to the mix, that's their baby, we're all for it. So we've got all sorts of things going on that are things that I would never do and really don't even have much interest in, but they generate income for somebody. Number 3, build collaborative and synergistic partnerships. Shared risk is key. You don't want employees, you want shared risk partners. So you have memorandums of understanding, subcontractors, and it might mean that some things aren't done the way you do them. You know, we had an apprentice that wanted to stay. And what do you want to do? So I really want to, he was very, very mechanical. And he said, I really would just like to have a farm shop and just fix things. So we sat down and developed a business plan for Farm Fix. I named it. I'm a wordsmith, so I get to name these things. Farm Fix. And he took over the shop. And I mean, he took over the shop. He poured concrete, put in lights. I mean, you could do dental work in there. But suddenly we didn't have to take anything to town anymore. Everything's done on site. And guess what? Neighbors started coming over, getting brake jobs and things. And it started outreaching into the neighborhood, into the community as people started coming over. I'm sure it was illegal as sin. We didn't ask for a permit, but it's wonderful, okay? Always look for your sweet spot, which is at the intersection of, so if you're making notes and you're drawing, draw 3 circles that all intersect at some point. One of them is what you know, one of them is what you love, and one of them is what you're good at. Know, love, good at. Where they intersect, that's the sweet spot in your life. And if everybody puts all their attention on trying to maximize the time where those 3 things intersect, what you know, what you love, what you're good at, that's our sweet spot for life. So that, as Alan Nation said, as you age, your goal is to eventually arrive at a point where when you get up in the morning, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And I'm really close to that, really blessed in that. Create community. People cover for each other. Cross-training. Leverage individual gifts and talents. Share equipment. Create this sharing community deal. All right. Fear number 5. Fear number 5, marketing. Man, there's not enough people who are interested in my stuff. I can't sell anything. If they don't buy, they're rejecting me, and I'll get depressed. This is my, these are my special carrots, If I charge a fair price, I'll look mercenary. These are all intimidating fears of people when they start hearing about marketing. Solution. Diversify the portfolio. Diversify the portfolio. Remember, it's easier to find 100 people who will spend $1,000 with you than 1,000 people who will spend $100. The hard part is getting somebody to buy your stuff. We live in a frenzied, frenetic, hurried, harried lifestyle, and you've got to have people, to get people to stop and take a look. It's better if you've got a customer to offer them something else. That's an easy dollar rather than finding another whole person with the one item that you have. Nobody makes money on the first sale. Your own money is only made on subsequent sales to the same person, because capturing that person initially is just too expensive. You can do this a couple of ways. You can value add something to your current product. So you can have whole chicken, you can have parts and pieces chicken, you can have chicken broth. You can simply manipulate your current product to make it worth more, or you can add other complementary items, honey, vegetables, apple juice. Your happy customers always want to buy more from you. And so they're constantly asking for, what else might you have in your portfolio? Listen to them. A lot of the things that we've added over the years have been a result of listening to our customers. Create commission-based partners, all right? Some people love to sell. Turn them loose. If a person can sell used cars, they can certainly sell carrots and eggs. So, selling is an actual customer interaction to get someone to turn loose of their money. People are really good at that. Hook up with them. Often, these are women. All of our salespeople, they're all part-time, and they're all women. Why? Because all of our customers are women. Women buy the food, men don't. Men just open the refrigerator and say, honey, I can't find it. That's all men do. And then there's, of course, electronic aggregation. We're moving away from bricks and mortar interfaces. So it's expensive to own and operate and maintain the cash register, bathrooms, and all the brick and mortar stuff. So there are all sorts of neat electronic retail interfaces now that will work with this. And don't be too weird, okay? I know that one of our successes has been that we're producing beef, pork, chicken. We're not producing bison and emu and whatever, arugula. Alan Nation used to always tell me, he said in marketing, you can't be but so weird. You can be a nudist or you can be a Buddhist. But if you're a nudist, Buddhist, nobody will trust you. They won't buy from you. So sell common things, preferably consumables. Be different, but not weird, okay? And don't fret the uninterested. Don't fret the uninterested. Leverage the choir, okay? The chances are, if you're selling good food, selling to Sheetz gas station is not your customer. Walmart is not your customer, okay? And remember that in your marketing, it's all about them and their needs, not about them. And look at your interface and say how difficult it is. If I wanted to buy from me, how difficult would that be? And break down those barriers. Fear number 6. Whew, I might go over here a couple of minutes. I hope that's okay. If they run me off, I'll run off. Okay. Fear number 6, business. The fear of business. A lot of people in our country think business is bad. I mean, just, these are the commie, pinko, liberal, whatever. Probably most of us here don't think business is inherently bad, but that's a real problem that I run into. What if it makes a profit? Well, I'll have to pay taxes. Oh, no, pay taxes. Besides, profit is evil. That's selfishness. What about administration, accounting, insurance? My head will explode. Maintaining margins and keeping the bills paid. This is scary stuff. What if somebody sues me? All right. These are all legitimate and real business fears. Solution. Solution number 1. Bookkeepers and accountants are everywhere. Hire one. There are people out there who actually love counting beans. Let them count beans. Pay them to count your beans. Okay? It's okay. It's okay. Number 2, categorize everything. Know your enterprise margins. Don't just lump, if you're raising broilers and turkeys and layers, don't lump it into feed. Separate it out so you can run marginal analysis on each enterprise, because generally one enterprise carries the others. So figure out which enterprises are carrying and work your numbers so that all of them you either get rid of the ones that are in deficit or you figure out how to help them. Segregate down to the minor details so you can tease out individual performance. Number 3, do time and motion studies. Time and motion study. Look, nobody owes you a living just because you're a noble farmer. We farmers, a lot of times we carry this chip on our shoulder. If it weren't for me, the world would starve to death and all that stuff. No. If it weren't for you, somebody else would go farm the land and everybody'd be happy. So, you're not going to save the world. Nobody cares. Nobody cares, okay? So keep a personal time card so you can create benchmarks. How long does it take to plant a foot of carrots? How long does it take to gather a dozen eggs? Because when you do this, when you do your time and motion studies, then you can actually have something that's duplicatable to somebody else. And you can then delegate that to somebody else with a modicum of benchmark assurity. So we have SOPs. We've done benchmark studies. So we have SOPs that, for example, when I say move chickens, move a chicken shelter, there's a 6-page SOP that explains what that phrase means. A 6-page SOP for move a chicken shelter, okay? So these are the kind of things that you can do to make sure that you can delegate and you can duplicate yourself out there, and you can do the $100 stuff while other people take over the $20 stuff. Stay in your unfair advantage. What do you do that nobody else can do? What do you do better that other people can't do? For example, we sell firewood, okay? We sell firewood. What's our advantage? Our advantage is selecting the right trees to cut and bringing it down. We can't drive a truck any faster. We can't split it any faster. We can't deliver it any faster than anybody else. So we just cut it, bring it down, put it in a big pile, let people drive their own pickup trucks and their own splitters and come and get it. And we stay in our lane. And that gives all the men a reason to justify owning a pickup truck to their wives. Beyond just throwing beer cans in on Friday night. So, number 5, insurance. About insurance, shop around. Don't tell them everything if you're a bit out of the box. They'll always cover you once. Your chance of being sued is in direct proportion to the amount of insurance you have. The more insurance you have, the more chance you have of being sued. So minimize your risk, have just what you need. Separate your business from your personal assets. Make an LLC, a C Corp, a trust, an S Corp, whatever. Alan Nation used to say, the reason every single person needs a business is so you can enjoy your life with pre-tax dollars. So we don't own our car. The Polyface rents our office in the house. There's all sorts of things that you can expense off if you have a business. So that's one of the biggest reasons to have one. Profit is the lifeblood of sustainability. It's what keeps you in business. It's what attracts people, young people to you. So it's the key to succession. And finally, the 7th fear, the fear of optimism. A lot of people are scared to be optimistic. Don't you know what's going on? I thought everything was going to the pits. Pessimism is fun. We're hardwired to be pessimists. That's why we call them stoplights and not go lights. We remember what stops us. We don't remember what makes us go. Don't you know we're running out of everything? Collapse is on the horizon. I can't afford to have a big vision. We're doomed anyway. The fear of optimism. Here's the solution. Number one, vision drives everything. Concentrate on what you'd like your community to be like, and then make it happen. Question. If time or money were not an issue, what would you do tomorrow? What would I do tomorrow? That's a great, profound question. If time or money were not an issue, what would I do tomorrow? And my response is, once you write that down, I say, then go do it. Don't be intimidated. Don't be fearful. Go do it. Number two, people love big missions and sacred cows. Sacred causes. Well, they like sacred cows too. Whew. Man, I've done a lot of talking the last day. Sacred causes, all right? They're magnetic. They draw people. I run into farmers every day. I can't get no help. Can't get no help. Can't get no help. Well, it's because they sit all day moaning against their pickup truck. Prices, government, weather, pestilence, the four horsemen of the apocalypse: price, pestilence, weather, and disease. They're all going to. Well, that doesn't attract people. But if we're healing the land, building soil, creating clean water and clean air and nutritious food, and shutting down the hospitals because everybody's healthy because we're providing healthy food, those are magnetic, attractive visions, and young people are attracted to that. We got to beat them off with a stick. We have over 100 young people that apply to our 11-person stewardship program every year. The reason we have such great ones is because we get to be selective. People love, even young people love sacred causes. You're not just a farmer, you're an ecology masseuse. Do something that's noble enough to attract the best and brightest youngsters. Fire their fantasy. Broaden your borders. Read eclectically. Read eclectically. Expose yourself to healers in economy, in emotion, in ecology. And faith eventually trumps fear. Faith is the Creator's design template. Faith in integrity and righteous food. Faith in the ultimate abundance of the earth as an object lesson of mercy and grace. And if we present our farms in that perspective, people will want to come and join us. My dad used to say, for us, every bush is a burning bush. And now, if you want a book, I've had numerous people kind of lost this year. Chelsea Green over there, Chelsea Green has all my books, and I'm glad to autograph them. Just run me down, and I'm glad to, but they're all at the Chelsea Green booth. I appreciate their partnership in this. And in the whole summit as well. So, are we going to be scared? No. Are we going to go forward? Yeah. So now may all of your carrots grow long and straight. May your radishes be large but not pithy. May tomato blossom end rot affect your Monsanto neighbor's tomatoes. May the coyotes be struck blind at your pastured chickens. May all of your culinary experiments be delectably palatable. May the rain fall gently on your fields, the wind be always at your back, your children rise and call you blessed. May we all make our nest in our communities a better place than we inherited. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you. Okay. We've got a couple of announcements, some things to sum up. And so right around noon today, we're going to be turning on the tickets for 2025. So if you are planning to be back next year, you can save yourself some money. So I was going to just run down through what we've learned from this stage in the last 2 days. First of all, we learned how frogs think. I never thought about the fact. I thought frogs croak. But Joel told us that they think. And then we had chaos management. We had war on weeds. We had destination preservation. We have why gardening reflects the image of God, nutrient needs. I mean, these are just the titles of all of the things we were able to participate. And then we had faith over fear this morning. It seemed like this wasn't really planned. We had fear as a topic all morning, and we demonstrated how to overcome it. Please just give it up one more time for all those people that got up here this morning. That was awesome. Then we learned about how to be more than farmers. I mean, I think that was very interesting because it's very easy to just get overwhelmed. And you need to have some margin in what you do. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed and don't have time for family. Neal Kinsey came back and talked about solving specific problems. Again, he's going to be here at 2 o'clock for 2 hours where you can get more direct input from him. And this is a guy that has been all over the world solving soil problems, so take advantage of that. And then we had the Seeds of Generosity. I think Marcus and his team needs a good round of applause. There is no end of the amount of work that goes into putting this thing together. Okay, and then we concluded with the 7 fears. Fear is such a disabling disease. Overcome it. Perfect love casts out fear. And it really does work that way. Okay, Marcus has a few announcements.
Lunch, whoa, that was loud, sorry. Lunch is ready, and looks like we've got a line forming there. We'll have lunch in the Big Tent. If you have an orange or tangerine wristband, if you don't have a wristband, you can buy a wristband over here at the networking table, and that way you won't cause a delay in the line. Ruby's Cafe, or Ruby's is right behind us here. Mission Cafe, serving wraps down by the workshop tents and the exhibitor tents. And then Smoking Chippers will be here with desserts later on this afternoon. Make sure your children have a chance to get take a ride on the barrels pulled by Norwegian Fjord. Did I say that right? Norwegian Fjord horses, the Homesteader horse. Timber frame structure raising will happen at about 1:15. So Green Acres Structures was working on that yesterday, and today they'll be raising that at about 1:15 if you want to take that in. And don't forget your gallon of microbial brew down close to the check-in booth. Every household gets a free gallon of microbial brew. There's labels there to put on your bottle. The microbial brew is an experiment, so let us know if it works well. Let us know if it doesn't work well. We hope it'll work like a good sourdough starter, where you can use what we give you and use from it and feed it with sugar and a little fertilizer and keep it going. I think that's it. Why don't we have a word of prayer before we join the line? Father in heaven, thank you for this day. Thank you for beautiful weather. Thank you for each amazing person that has gathered here. And as we go forth, would you help us to make the world a better place and to not forget what we've heard and also add to what we've heard. We pray your blessing on the food, on the hands that have prepared it, and we pray in Jesus' name, amen.